what we tend to focus on maybe too much in the fitness and health space are the mechanistic actions. And that's important, like proteins, fats, carbs, calories, what exercise and kind of workout and that kind of stuff. And that is important. But what I try to do is I look at all that in the context of the average person, not in the context of I'm talking to a fitness fanatic or someone who's hyper motivated, because that motivated state of mind tends to fade like all feelings do. Also, people are very busy nowadays, very sedentary, but also very busy. I mean, if you look at people's schedules, you and I remember when we were kids, there were no play dates. You just went out and played with your friends.
So
and
true.
Everything's scheduled now. So it's like everything's scheduled, super busy, super sedentary. We're also surrounded by hyper palatable, easily accessible food. And we grew up in an environment where we learned how to value food for its palatability and enjoyment and its accessibility or convenience. So that's kind of what we're battling with. And we got to understand that context before we really recommend what people should do, because if we make the wrong recommendations, it's not going to work. And we know this. People fail at like 85% of the time when it comes to long-term success.
What's the main thing? What do people what's the myth that they got involved for and then they find out it just isn't true, or is there something else? Like, why such a high failure rate?
Yeah, well, the big reason is how they go into it. And I started the same way. And this is how most people start on a fitness routine. It starts from a place of, for lack of a better term, self-hate. I'm fat, or in my case, I'm skinny. I don't like the way I look. I want to change who I am. But it's kind of this negative motivating factor, which you have to move out of into a self-love state of mind, like I'm taking care of myself. Otherwise, at some point, you'll stop. You can't hate yourself forever. I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, you have a friend who was on a workout routine or following a diet, and then you see him a year later and you go, hey, how was that program going? And they say, oh, I had to stop because I just wanted to enjoy life. I mean, logically, it's insane to say that, right? Taking care of yourself improves all aspects of your life. And yet this person says, I want to enjoy life, so I stopped. Well, what do they mean? Well, it was coming from a place of self-hate. Exercise was a punishment. Nutrition was restrictive, also
I'm disgusting,
punishment.
I shouldn't have eaten that, go to the gym.
Beat myself up, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the factors. The other factor is the approach. What we've learned how to, just the average person, has been told to value exercise mainly by its calorie burn. And that's so wrong, because the amount of calories you burn while you exercise is actually the least important thing. All the things that exercise provides you.
How's that possible? So we'll probably get to the calories in, calories out debate at some point.
Yes.
It's probably not the place to start. But how is it possible that I'm not just in the gym to burn calories?
Okay, so first off,
if I want to lose my belly fat, for instance.
Yes, so calorie burn is important, right? In order to lose weight, you have to burn more calories than you take in. Now, that's a very simplistic way of saying it. It's true, but it's more complex than that. But let's just start with the simplistic formula. You got to burn more than you take in. First off, the calories you burn while you exercise really isn't that much. You work out for an hour really hard, you'll burn like 400 calories. Okay, so it's not a ton. And if you work out 2 or 3 days a week, consistently, like most people will, it's 800, 1,200 calories a week. It's not making a huge impact. So that's number one. But the main factor is the reason why that's not that important is we're ignoring the most important aspect of exercise, which is, how does this get my body to adapt? And then what does the adaptation mean? So that's very important. If we look at exercise from an adaptation perspective, then we can start to judge exercise and say, which one, in the context of fat loss, which one is going to speed up my metabolism, okay? Which one is going to teach my body to burn more calories on its own? Because that is a much more sustainable approach. I mean, if you're burning more calories, like right now, I'm sitting here talking to you, if my body's going to burn more calories because I've trained it to do so, that's far more effective than me going out and manually trying to burn calories with my workouts. Also, if you do the wrong kind of workout and pair it with calorie restriction, you can actually teach your body to do the opposite. You can actually teach your body to become more efficient with calories, AKA you can slow your metabolism down, which in the long run makes things much more challenging. And we see this. People do this all the time. When you look at the average person's approach to weight loss, calorie restriction, lots of calorie burning cardiovascular activity, for example.
Cardio and starvation, baby.
Yes.
Let's fucking go, my man.
Yeah. And what you see is this initial weight loss, which is usually comprised of some muscle and some body fat. And the muscle loss isn't because you burn the muscle, but rather your body was actually learning how to be a more efficient cardio machine. It actually pares muscle down.
Which if you're trying to get lean, that's bad. It sounds good, efficiency. I love efficiency.
Yes.
But in this case, it's terrible.
It is. I mean, if we were hunter-gatherers and food was difficult to come by, you want an efficient metabolism. You want a metabolism that doesn't require lots of energy. But if you live in a modern society with lots of food, you want a faster metabolism. That's the best buffer that you could possibly create.
How do we speed it up?
Right, you build muscle. Build muscle and fuel the building process because, first off, more muscle burns more calories. Now, I'm sure there's people watching.
Even at rest.
All the time. Now, I know people watching right now are going to say, well, a pound of muscle only burns an additional 10 calories or whatever, which, by the way, isn't inconsequential. If you gained 5 pounds of muscle, 50 calories a day over the course of a year, that could equate to 7, 8, 10 pounds of body fat. So over the years, you're not going to gain as much weight, or you'll lose that much weight. But it's more than that, right? When you're sending the signal to build muscle and you're fueling your body to do so, you burn more calories even without additional muscle, because there's a range of calories your body will burn with the same lean body mass. We actually have this kind of flexibility, more versus less efficiency, if you will. So you don't need to gain a ton of muscle. I mean, if you gain 5, 10 pounds, which wouldn't make you that much bigger, you would just feel much tighter. But that signal is there. We need strength, we need muscle, and you fuel your body with enough protein and enough calories, appropriate levels of calories to do so. Your body doesn't feel like it needs to be as efficient, and you actually teach your metabolism to burn more calories. So the old way, the weight loss you see on the scale happens faster, but then you plateau very hard. And then you're left with the conundrum of, I got to add more cardio? I got to cut my calories even more? Now, if you do it the right way, the weight loss on the scale starts a little slower, but then you see this kind of snowball effect. And I've seen this many times, at the end of a 30-pound weight loss journey, you eat as many or more calories as you did when you first started, which, I mean, for obvious reasons, a very sustainable approach. Now I can eat more than I did when I was at a higher body fat percentage and maintain my lean body. And so those are some of the things that we need to consider when we're communicating nutrition and fitness. But again, that's the mechanistic portion of it, which I talk about. But there's also the behavioral aspect, which I think is either as important or more important.
All right, before we move on to the behavioral, I want to really just restate exactly what you said super simply for people at home that are going to do this. So, number one, getting into the gym, most people think of as getting on a piece of cardio equipment. So you're on the treadmill, the elliptical, whatever, you're, like sweating your ass off.
Burning.
Yeah. So when I got lean, so I ended up dropping 60 pounds. I did it through, I was lifting, so that was a big part of the victory, but I was absolutely doing starvation and cardio.
Yeah.
And I got lean. It was amazing, but I lost so much muscle. It was crazy, and it was misery.
Yeah.
I hated every second of it.
Yeah.
Now, I have freakish discipline, so I did this for 2 years, but the idea of living there was just a non-starter.
Yeah.
It was like, because I was seeing progress, I could keep doing it, but eventually it was like, I'm not gonna do this forever. So we want to get you in the gym in a new way. This is going to be resistance training. You're going to be lifting, to use sort of traditional words. We'll get more into that later, but you're going to be lifting, whether it's bands and you're getting the resistance that way, or whether it's, a bench press or squat, whatever. So you're going to go in, you're adding muscle because that is going to give you the ability to burn more calories, even at rest, even though it's not, some gigantic freakish number. And we'll probably get into things like it's also a sink for glucose, which is hugely transformational. But also, when you're sending your body the signal to add muscle, you're saying we need this strength. To get that strength, it's okay to burn calories. We're going to give the body the calories that it needs. So now I'm not having to ratchet down my calories in order to burn the additional calories. I'm burning them by giving my body the signal that I don't need to be as efficient with my metabolism. So we can call that dialing up the speed of my metabolism, if you will. Whereas if I go in and I'm doing cardio, I'm sending the body a similar stress signal, but it's in an opposite direction.
Yes.
So I'm saying, hey, you have this stressor, you need to adapt to it. But this stressor is saying, don't add muscle, shave muscle because the muscle's expensive. I'm going to put you in these sort of long distance needs. So you're going to need to be more efficient with the calories. So now if you're eating the same, you could be moving yourself backwards. So you could be working your ass off to add fat.
Yes.
Which is terrifying, but is what a lot of people do.
It is. It's very well said. It is.
That's literally me parroting your book.
That's
just in case people think I'm clever. I am literally parroting.
Yes, that's 100%. And a couple things that make this even more, I guess, attractive for people. You don't need to do a lot of strength training to get those results. If you're burning calories manually all the time, the more the better. With strength training, a couple days a week or 3 days a week is enough. It's plenty to elicit those responses in the body. And you talked about losing muscle. Here's something that's very fascinating about that. You don't just lose or gain muscle. There's a lot of things that happen in your body to make that happen. And one of them is your body organizes its hormones in a way to do so. So if you're a man and you're telling your body, we need to drop some muscle, your body will organize its hormones to do so. What does that look like?
That's interesting.
Looks like,
you just gave me the chills.
Yeah, it looks like lower testosterone, right? You get a higher, more consistent cortisol response. Your insulin sensitivity starts to change a little bit, right? More muscle improves insulin sensitivity. In fact, studies on obese individuals show that if you just have them gain muscle and lose no body fat, they have significant improvements in insulin sensitivity. In women, their estrogen and progesterone organize to reduce muscle mass. Growth hormone changes as well. On the flip side, if I tell my body to build muscle and I feed it to do so, it'll organize its hormones in a way to build muscle. What does that look like? A youthful hormone profile. So this is why studies show that strength training is the most consistent way to raise testosterone, for example, in men. It also, and here's something that's even more interesting, increases androgen receptor density. So these are the receptors that testosterone attaches to. And this is probably even more important than your testosterone levels. In fact, there was a study that tried to...
Really interesting.
Yeah, they did a study where they were comparing men and their testosterone levels and athletic performance and strength gains. And they were also looking at androgen receptor density. Androgen receptor density was a better predictor of strength and muscle gains, right? Yeah. So strength training literally opens up more androgen receptors. It's trying to make your anabolic hormones even more effective and anabolic. So people are constantly looking at ways to become more youthful. Hormones are a great way to do that. Strength training literally tells your body to organize them in a way to do so. So it's the benefits are so far-reaching. You know, you talked about storing glucose. So here's something that's really interesting. I know you'll like this. Strength training has been shown to be one of the most effective ways to stop or halt the progression of the beta amyloid plaques that are so associated with Alzheimer's, right? In fact, I think it's the only non-medical intervention to do so. And at the end of the study, it actually looked like it may have been reversing some of those plaques. This was a study done out of Sydney, Australia. And they were quite blown away. One of the theories has to do with insulin sensitivity. As you probably already know, some researchers refer to dementia and Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. So what you do when you build muscle is you create a larger tank to store, glycogen or glucose, but muscle is also extremely insulin sensitive. So your body just utilizes insulin better as a result. So building muscle is a great way to do that. And another study just came out of Sydney as well recently that showed that strength training reduced all-cause mortality better than any other form of exercise and cancer risk.
This is so crazy. So I've heard people say this a gazillion times, but I really think people are letting this go over their head, that if you look at the efficacy of diet alterations and exercise, the impact on things like cancer, longevity, hormones, like all of it, it is so much more profound than the most effective drug.
Yeah.
That it's like, if you had a drug that improved your metrics the way that exercise improves your metrics, it would be like a blockbuster $1 trillion like thing. But because we can't just pop the exercise pill, people leave the most obvious solution on the table.
Yeah, one of the best parts about it is that the improvements continue the longer you do it. Whereas with medications or drugs, for example, when they compare exercise to antidepressants for mild to moderate depression, okay, so this is the most common form of depression, very similar results when it comes to relieving the symptoms of depression. But as you follow the studies, you start to see that exercise actually starts to do better. Now, why is that? There's no downregulation of receptors. Your body doesn't adapt to exercise the same way it adapts to medications. It's like when you drink caffeine, you get this buzz, drink it every day, it starts to lose its efficacy. Exercise actually improves over time. If anybody who's worked out consistently and appropriately, and I do want to be very clear, appropriate is important here.
Because people push it too far or what?
Yes, all forms of exercise can be applied inappropriately. And all forms of exercise also have value. I also want to say that because I know we're talking about strength training, and I make the case that strength training in the context that we're painting is the most effective form. But all forms of exercise have a lot of value. They all need to be applied appropriately. What's appropriate depends on
even cardio, you're not throwing shade on it, you're just saying you got to be thoughtful.
Yes, it has to be, it's based on the individual. What's your fitness level and your ability to recover? What does your current lifestyle look like? Is this adding too much stress to your body, the right amount? Is it improving the quality of your life? And you can always adjust your workouts accordingly. So you have to do all those things. But yeah, when it comes to improving all health metrics, mental, psychological, and physical, as you follow along, as you continue the process, it gets better and better. There's no medication that does that at all. Almost all start to show reduced efficacy, and people need to change medications and what's going on here. So yeah, 100%. And I like to talk a lot about strength training, mainly because you don't need to do a lot of it to get a lot of these effects and these benefits. And it's because, Tom, I trained people for so long, and I did a really good job of getting people who never worked out to do it forever, right? I'm trying to look at how do I get people to do something forever, okay? The best I got was 2 or 3 days a week out of people. I couldn't turn the average person into a fitness fanatic. It took me 5 years to figure that out, but I'm like, okay, Mrs. Johnson is not gonna be a personal trainer like I am, isn't gonna live in the gym. I got to figure out a way to get the best results for her in the 2 or 3 days a week that she's going to, spend time exercising. And it was strength training by far. Nothing came close to it. When we talked about the metabolism effects, there's a study I quote in the book that was remarkable. It's the study done on the Hadza tribe.
Yeah.
Really crazy, right? So this is a modern hunter-gatherer tribe out of northern Tanzania. And they live the way that we lived thousands and thousands of years ago. So they don't have any electronics. They hunt their food by throwing something at it and running after it for miles and miles. They gather, so far more active than we are. And scientists went down to study their metabolisms, and they used some pretty sophisticated processes. And they said, okay, how many calories are these hunter-gatherers burning every single day? And the results came back and was pretty remarkable. Not very much more than the average Western couch potato, almost identical, in fact. Now you might think to yourself, like, how is this even possible? They're moving so much, and the average Western couch potato literally sits down most of the time and barely takes 3,000 steps. Like, what's going on? But if you look at things from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Our bodies, we wouldn't have survived if our bodies learned to burn 6,000 calories a day as hunter-gatherer. You can't find 6,000 calories as a hunter-gatherer. Their bodies adapted to that type of activity, which included a lot of walking and running, running after animals until they collapse. We run for distance very, very well.
That's so nuts. I don't think people in a modern context really appreciate that there is one thing that the human as an animal does, set thinking aside, we can track your ass down.
We do two things really well physically. And I say we as a species because the average person is really bad at some of these things because we stopped doing them. But we throw with accuracy. A kid will throw with better accuracy than any other animal. And we can outlast or outrun almost anything. Now, the problem with running is it's a skill that we all lose, probably around the age of 12 when we stop, playing at recess or whatever.
And you also mean at distance. Because in a sprint, a cheetah's going to fuck us up.
Distance. It's distance, 100%. We can out-trek, right? Outlast. Not in sprint. We're terrible at sprinting. But we lose the skill because we stop doing it. And then we're 34 and we're like, hey, I want to lose weight. Let me put on my running shoes. and we go run, and just the biomechanics technique is terrible. That's why running is associated, it's the highest injury risk of all forms of exercise because of the repetitive nature and because nobody treats it like a skill. Like, nobody says, I'm gonna go run, let me practice running.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Look, I have a free guide that teaches you how to lose fat in 3 steps, just 3 steps that will burn the most amount of body fat and help keep it off. This guide is totally free. We're giving it to everybody right now. If you want it, click on the link at the top of the description below. All right, back to the show.
They say, I'm gonna go run until I'm tired, which anytime you're learning a skill, the worst way to learn proper technique and form is to do it until you're fatigued, because technique goes out the window when you're exhausted. And I remember when I first pieced that together, I was hiking up in the foothills by where I live, and people would run by me. And as a trainer, it's hard not to notice biomechanics, right? So their feet are pronating really bad, or really strong anterior pelvic tilt, and that person's gonna hurt, and this person. And then this person ran by me and just looked beautiful, like a gazelle. And I thought, man, we evolved to run. Why do we run so terribly? And I said, well, that's when it dawned on me. We don't treat it like a skill. We just put on our shoes and go run till we're tired. It's about just working out. It's not about the fact that this is an actual skill that we need to figure out and learn. This is one of the reasons why the way I teach strength training is as a skill, not necessarily as a workout. So when I tell people go to the gym, I don't say, train your legs until they're tired, until they burn, or until you're shaking. I say, practice squatting, practice lunging, right? I don't say go get your shoulders hammered. I say practice the skill of the overhead press, practice the skill of a lateral raise or a bench press or a row. And over time, that produces better results because people treat it like a skill. They practice it rather than work out with it. And I can't stress this enough. An exercise done properly will provide so much more value than an exercise practiced or performed improperly. Besides the risk of injury, which that's obvious, it just gives you so much more. Even at lower intensities, done properly, you're gonna get way more bang for your buck or time spent in the gym. So I encourage people, and I write in the book, don't go to the gym and work out. Go to the gym and practice these exercises and try to get good at these exercises. And then you'll naturally add resistance or weight or heavier resistance bands as you continue to progress. But practice those movements, get the skill, and that'll just give you so much more results.
Yeah, definitely haven't heard people talk about that. That's really interesting. You go into detail in the book about things that are really quite counterintuitive. So bringing that back around to the Hadza and the way that one of the important things in the book that I found so compelling is this idea that this is about adaptation. And so you're gonna go into the gym and you're gonna do something. It's gonna inform your body in the direction in which it needs to adapt. So if you're giving your body the signal that, hey, I'm an endurance animal, I need to be extraordinarily efficient with my calories, you're gonna look like a long distance runner, very slender musculature, lean, but very slender musculature. If you are focusing on explosion, the ability to deal with weight, you're gonna look more like a sprinter.
Yes.
And when you mentioned that in the book, I was like, oh damn, like that's real, because a sprinter who's running and a long distance marathon runner who's running, they don't look anything alike.
No, nothing. And I do wanna be also very careful. If we judge exercise by the people that perform it at the highest level, we're also looking at people who genetically were born to also perform at very high levels. So like if you look at like Michael Phelps, someone may say, wow, if I swim a lot, I'm gonna get a really long torso, long arms, short legs, and a flat, wide rib cage. So we gotta also be careful with that because we can look at the top athletes, but what we're looking at are also genetic anomalies. Nonetheless, yes, lots of distance running will teach your body to become efficient with calories. Sprinting or things that require strength and power, the primary adaptation is muscle and strength, the side effect of which is a higher calorie burn. Now, when we talk about adaptation, it's important to separate adaptation from recovery. Okay, this is very important because people confuse the two. They think recovery is adaptation. Now, they often happen simultaneously or right around the same time, but they're not the same thing. So like, if I got a piece of sandpaper and rubbed the skin raw on the top of my hand, the first thing my body would do is recover. It would heal the skin that was rubbed off. The second thing it would do would be to make that skin a little thicker so that it would withstand the same insult better next time around. And if I continue that process over time, I'll develop a callus on my skin. Exercise is the same. No matter what exercise you do, the recovery process is different from adaptation. And the reason why I'm communicating that is people get stuck, they get trapped in what I like to call the breakdown recovery trap, right? They go to the gym, they get sore, then the soreness goes away and they go back to the gym and they get sore again, and they never improve. And they don't know why. Why am I not really getting stronger? Why is nothing really changing? I'm working out hard, I'm getting sore, it's real intense. I'm recovering, but then I'm going back to the gym and I'm not really seeing lots of progress. You're not giving your body the opportunity to adapt. You're just focused on recovery. And when it comes to exercise, there is a best dose. And it's kind of like a bell curve, right? So on this end, too little. I'm not going to get much of a response. In the middle, perfect amount. Like it's the perfect dose. My body's responding. It's recovering. It's adapting. I'm progressing. On the other end is too much. And you can always tolerate more than what is the optimum amount. So in other words, people tend to, and now I'm talking more to the fitness fanatic, but people tend to do what they can tolerate, not what is optimal. So they'll work out, get great results, and they'll think, I can do more. I think I can do more. I feel good. And then they do more, and then they do more, and they actually get slower or less results.
Damage.
It's just too much. It's too much, and they're actually not optimizing. They're just doing what they can.
So how do
tolerate.
we find that for the average person that's trying to get, I don't know, the more idealized physique, not a bodybuilder physique, but
sure. Healthy,
exactly.
and fit. Yeah, and speaking to that, a healthy, fit body displays what most people want to look like. So you won't look extreme. In other words, the extreme bodies are not healthy. Those are extreme performance. Like a top NBA player or football player or athlete is not optimally healthy. They're just incredible at performance. Optimal health is a little different, right? It's lean, but you're not shredded. You've got good strength, good mobility. You feel good. So how do we know that we're doing the right amount? Well, I just said it. You feel good. First off, after your workout, you should feel better than you did right before. You should not feel like
really
you're dead. Absolutely.
Man, I've been doing that part. I have been doing wrong forever. Then.
Yeah. Well, so here's the deal, Tom. Your discipline is extraordinary. Obviously, you're the kind of person that you're not going to stop. You're going to keep going. You're going to push yourself. And there are mental and psychological benefits to pushing yourself to a limit. So I don't want to say that there's no benefit to training that way. But for the average person, that should be few and far between. So I think it's good. You should definitely push yourself sometimes. But most of the time, you should feel better at the end. You go into your workout, and afterwards, you're like, oh man, I feel great. Another way to know, especially in the first, I'd say maybe 3 years of exercise, is strength. If you're getting stronger, you're doing a lot right. It's hard to get stronger and to have bad nutrition, poor sleep, incorrect or inappropriate exercise. So if your weight on the bar, or if you're able to do more reps, or you feel more stable in your exercises, if you're noticing that, you're probably doing a lot of things right. But really, you got to judge it by how you feel. You need to feel better. I remember when I pieced this together as a trainer. When I first became a trainer, I would get cancellations from clients when they would be tired, or they call me up and say, hey Sal, I had a rough night last night. I'm really tired. I think I need to skip today's workout. Or my I think I tweaked it yesterday, so let's skip today's workout. Later on, as I became a more effective trainer, I had the opposite. People would call me and say, hey, I know I don't have a session today, but I'm really stressed out. Do you think I can come see you?
Wow.
Or, hey, my back is not feeling so good. I know we're not supposed to work out today, but can you see me so that we can make my back feel better?
Give me the chills again. That is for sure. Like,
yes.
Just speaking to back pain for a second, whenever somebody tells me they have back pain, I'm like, you need to be deadlifting. Now you have to be careful because you can definitely get yourself in trouble with deadlifts. But my back only hurts if I skip deadlifting. But if I'm deadlifting with proper form in a weight that's appropriate, to use your words, then I'm good. And so my natural inclination when I'm in pain, my natural inclination is to figure out, is there an imbalance here? Is there something that I've been slacking on? It isn't like, oh, I bet I'm overtraining.
Yeah, strength makes us resilient. Strength is what makes us mobile. Mobility comes from strength. Immobility comes from weakness. Now, we tend to think it's tightness. I'm tight. I need to become looser. That's part of the formula. If you're really loose, but you lack strength, your injury risk is through the roof. You have terrible stability. You can cause yourself a lot of problems. If you're tight without a lot of strength, same thing. Good, full range of motion, appropriate and balanced strength is what prevents pain. It's what makes your joints move optimally. Joints move in a way to where your body essentially moves in the most efficient way it can with what it's given, okay? So if you're weak or not strong enough, or not stable enough to move in the optimal way, your body's gonna take option B and then maybe option C, and it gets the job done. But over time, like a sliding door that's slightly off track, over time what happens to that track, right? It gets worn down and you start to see problems. So strength, properly applying strength training and appropriate strength training makes you, bulletproof to pain. You move better. That's how you build real functional flexibility. I get people upset sometimes because I say that proper strength training is the best way to improve functional flexibility. People are like, what do you mean? I thought strength training made you tight. No, it doesn't. Full range of motion with good control, good stability strengthens entire ranges of motion, right? Because you want to own ranges of motion. I don't just want flexibility. I mean, I have an 18-month-old son, and I could put him on the floor, and I could take his foot and put it by his head and put him in the splits, but he's not very stable. I mean, you put any load on him, and he's going to hurt himself, right? Not that I've tried. I haven't put any barbells on his back yet. But if you're strong within a full range of motion, and you're on the floor, and you're playing with your kids, or you're twisting, or whatever, you own that full range of motion, you're not going to hurt yourself. You're very strong. And that's what proper strength training would do. Now, the reason why we see people who sometimes lift a lot of weights look so tight is because they don't train properly in that context. They train in short ranges of motion. You'll see this bodybuilders sometimes to build muscle, but because those ranges of motion are short, they build strength in that range of motion. Then what's outside of that range of motion is imbalanced. So their body learns to move in this kind of limited, tight, what they used to call muscle-bound range of motion. So I really try to break through the myths and the stigma that surrounds strength training because there's so much around it. For a long time, Tom, there were no studies that were done on strength training and health and longevity. There were none. There were performance studies, but none on health. All studies for health and longevity revolved around cardiovascular activity. 30 to 60 minutes of vigorous cardiovascular activity. And of course, there's health benefits, right? Like I said, any form of activity done properly will improve your health. But there was nothing for strength training. There was nothing. In the last 15 to 20 years, though, there have been lots of studies, and they're finding incredible results. It's one of the best forms of exercise for heart health. Who would have said strength training is good for your heart, right? I had a cardiologist on my podcast who said, this is how I recommend all my clients or all my patients.
Resistance training.
Yes, because of...
Not cardio?
No, and he says...
I mean, literally, cardio is the word for heart in Greek.
I know. Now he says, if you're only going to pick one form of exercise, if you only have time to do one, do strength training. Then if you can add another one, add the cardio.
Wow.
He says walk every day.
I've never heard that before.
You're going to start to see this more and more as the studies start to support this more and more.
Do you know what the mechanism is? Like, why would getting strong help your heart? Especially because, now I'm privy to I've heard you talk about this so much. But you said there was a guy that you used to watch train, and he would just like, oh, I've got a second. And he would like bang out a few sets. And you were like, but no, how do you really train? He's like, no, that is. When I have a second, I'll jump in for 3 reps or whatever. Yeah,
conditioning and longevity are related, but not exactly the same thing. So like if you look at extreme distance runners or extreme endurance athletes, you actually start to see declining health in their heart. So just lots of damage.
In distance.
Yes, or any extreme athlete, okay? You start to see declines in longevity. Now, we associate cardiovascular activity with heart performance, which is why we think it's the best way to exercise for heart health. And it is a good way to exercise for heart health. But I think the reason why strength training is showing now to be so good for heart health has to do with its ability to keep you lean, to just keep you from storing too much body fat, visceral body fat. And look, although it's not going to build stamina and endurance like other forms of exercise, you do build some stamina and endurance. I mean, do a set of 20 reps with a barbell squat and tell me you're not, breathing really hard. So you still do build that. And again, when we're talking about longevity, it's different than just performance. I love walking. This is what I always recommend to people. I tell people, walk every single day. And I teach them to inject it into their daily routine, so it's not a scheduled workout. It's more likely to be consistent. And that's where I see people get great health benefits because, 10-minute walk after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 30 minutes a day, and they get great longevity effects as a result. But yeah, when it comes to the brain, the heart, functional flexibility, strength training is incredible. And I'm sure you're familiar with this. We've now identified one metric that can predict all-cause mortality almost better than almost any other single metric. And it sounds silly, but it's a simple grip test. It's a strength test.
Do you think that's a proxy, or is there something about actual grip strength? Like if I just work my grip,
no,
would I be good?
Yeah,
or
no.
That's like a...
No, I think it represents overall strength of the body. And so when you're weak in your grip, that tells us a lot about your body and your health. And declining muscle mass is huge as we get older. It's probably one of the main reasons why we have declining health as we go. Loss of mobility, insulin sensitivity goes down, hormones start to change, our body's ability to burn body fat really starts to change and go for the worse. We have the brain effects. Speaking to the brain effects, strength training is more complex in its movements than other forms of exercise. Like it's not like the same thing over and over. Like if you swim or you bike or you row or you run, there's at least, I could probably name 100 strength training exercises, and I'm sure there's 100 or 500 more, and there's 5 different ways to perform each one. When you're doing strength training, you're moving in different planes. You're training your proprioceptive ability.
You're gonna have to tell people what that means.
Proprioception is knowing where my body is in space, right? So if I do 6 different exercises, well, one of them is going to have me lifting something overhead. One of them might have me doing a horizontal movement. I may be rotating or stepping to the side or stepping back or stepping forward. It involves lots of balance and lots of focus from the brain. It's harder to check out when you're doing strength training. When you're doing a hard set of push-ups or rows, you're doing it, you're in it, versus checking out when you're doing other forms of repetitive exercise. So, and I think there's benefit to that as well, but when it comes to training the brain, moving the body and training the muscles in a way that is appropriately strenuous in different planes of motion, it trains the brain. It keeps your brain's ability to do those types of things youthful and effective. Whereas if I stop doing those things, you lose it. That old adage, you don't use it, you lose it. It's super true. Your body prunes things off that it doesn't think it needs. So, in fact, the population that really benefits from strength training more than anybody is the older population. The results they get are profound.
Isn't there some crazy correlation between muscle mass and longevity?
Huge. Just strength training alone, they just did a large study comparing cancer risk, reducing cancer risk in different forms of exercise. Strength training blew all the other ones away. It was like a 25 or 30% reduction in cancer risk.
That's what I'm talking about, man. With that, if there was a drug that could give you a 25% reduced rate, I'd eat them like Skittles.
Absolutely. And then all-cause mortality was something like 50 or 60% from strength training. It's if you think of the things associated with aging that tend to be terrible, it's loss of mobility. I can't go up the stairs anymore. I can't reach up above my head anymore. I can't close the hood of my car or the trunk anymore. It's risk of injury. I used to train a lot of doctors, and I remember they used to have this saying, you break your hip and you die of pneumonia, right? How do you break your hip? Well, you don't have the strength, which strength contributes to balance. You fall, your bones are weak because you've lost muscle. Losing muscle means your bones are getting weaker, by the way.
Is that because you're not putting your bones under pressure?
Yeah, muscles anchor on bones. If the muscle strengthens, the bone strengthens. Anything that makes muscle stronger will make bones stronger. Anything that makes muscles weaker.
Even if you're not putting it, because I always thought the bone is like, because when you curl, you can feel that in your forearm. Like you could tell that bone is like, whoa, I better like really have the ability to control this.
Yeah, it's both. It's both. So like anabolic hormones that improve muscle mass also tend to improve bone mass as well.
In fact, this is like the third time I've thought I really want to put a point on that. You said something earlier that I've never thought about before, that the mechanism your body is using to make these changes is hormonal.
Yeah.
So when you...
Hey, sorry to interrupt. We have a free guide titled Understanding Your Mood, Stress, and Sleep. It tackles all of those things from a health and longevity perspective. It's a totally free guide. So just click on the link at the top of the description below.
Put your body under stress. The response is one of hormones, which is going to guide adding of muscle, losing of fat, whatever the case may be. And that's interesting. You're really manipulating that hormonal milieu, which is fascinating. Because when I think about like, oh, you need to get your hormones right, like the thought that my lifestyle could lower my testosterone or raise my testosterone, as a guy, I pay like a lot of attention because I make a value judgment about my testosterone levels, if I'm completely honest. It's like if something raises my testosterone, it is good. And if it lowers my testosterone, it is bad.
Yes, it's vitality. It's your body saying reproduce. We're healthy enough to reproduce. Testosterone gives a man and women drive and
It's
motivation.
interesting. You've referred to testosterone as a female hormone, which is, I think, really important to reinforce.
It is. It's we associate it with men, but low testosterone women give them the same effects that low testosterone men will have. So low drive, low energy, low motivation, low libido, higher body fat, less muscle, less strength, less energy. Estrogen is also important in men, just like in women.
Yeah.
Low estrogen in men can cause depression, anxiety. So we need to have, there's a balance that we need to have, and it looks different for men than it does for women, but you still want appropriate levels. Now, strength training is not going to take your testosterone to anabolic steroid levels. Right. It's not going to move outside of the range, but you can significantly increase your testosterone within the natural range just by telling your body you need more muscle. Because it's the signalers, right? It's what tells your body to do what you need it to do or what you want it to do. So yeah, it definitely changes that. And testosterone has been declining in men now for decades.
Any form of exercise is very complex. Now, here's the benefit of resistance training and strength training. Of all the forms of exercise, it's the one that is constantly communicated the most to be about form. When you go lift weights or you do resistance training, what you constantly hear is technique, form, feel the muscle, make sure you do it right. You don't hear this with other forms of exercise, especially cardio. So what this has done is made people think that is complicated, everything else is not complicated. Not true, it's all complicated. Your best bet and best approach, and I write about this in the book, with any form of exercise, but I talk about this in regards to resistance training, treat it like practice. When you go to the gym to do your squats or your presses or your rows, don't go and do them like I'm trying to get my legs tired and sore, but rather go and say, I'm going to get really good at squatting. I'm going to get really good at overhead pressing. I'm going to get really good at rowing. In the long term, that will benefit you tremendously over the I'm going to go and get sore and work out mentality, because technique and form are so important, again, for all forms of exercise. So those are the three main reasons why I think people avoid resistance training. I mean, even men, I think if even the average guy, if you went to the doctor and the doctor said you have high blood pressure or your blood lipids are off, I need you to start exercising. And, if I were to talk to them and say, oh, we should go lift weights, they would even say, oh, no. I'm not trying to get big. I'm trying to just get healthy.
Down. Yeah.
So there's so many misconceptions and there's this huge stigma. And my goal with the book, The Resistance Training Revolution, was really to overcome that, explain what resistance training really is, and then explain why it's vastly superior to any other form of exercise for most people's goals, which include weight loss, improving their health, improving their quality of life, especially when we consider the context of modern life, which if you want, we could always, we could get into that.
I do want to go there. Maybe we can launch with something that you just talked about, and that is, I just want to go run till I'm tired. I just want to just like feel exhausted. Like people chase that, right? And that creates dysfunctional eating patterns. I mean, I found in the endurance athletic community, because unlike resistance training, when you're doing a high volume cardio, because as you talk about in the book, you get more and more efficient. So you might do a 20-minute run, then it turns into a 40-minute run, and you're covering more distance over a shorter period of time. So your body is conserving energy better. And then in the post-exercise window, you have this propensity to overeat, and it creates a lot of runners, a lot of athletes that focus on cardio. They all have, most of them, and I used to be a competitive cyclist, have tons of GI issues as a result of that, and then they can't figure out why they're not losing the weight, right? So maybe let's talk about the idea that like really focusing on how the fat loss is much more sustained over the long haul when it comes to resistance training, comparing that to cardio because of the sort of metabolic after effect and the oxygen debt and all that.
Yeah. So, and we don't even have to get that complex. The paradigm that we've been sold for so long when it comes to weight loss, which there's some truth to it, but then there's a lot of falseness in it, is the following, right? So here's the paradigm, right? So we know that in order to lose weight, you need to take in less calories than you burn, or burn more calories than you take in. This is a law of thermodynamics, right? So energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So in order to lose weight, I have to burn more than I'm eating or eat less than I'm burning, and which is true. Now, the problem with the paradigm that they're selling us is the burn portion of this formula is that they've valued exercise as calorie burn. That's all the value that they placed on it. In fact, even now, if you ask many times health professionals or medical professionals especially, what form of exercise is the best, they'll be like, well, running burns the most calories, right? It's all about how many calories that form of exercise burns. Now, the problem with that is we completely ignore the real value of exercise, which is, how does this form of exercise get my body to adapt? And then what does that mean? Like, what do those adaptations mean? That's what's really important. Now, why is the calorie burn while I'm doing the activity not that important? Because my body learns to adapt very quickly to that, especially if I'm doing a form of exercise that prioritizes energy conservation, right? That prioritizes efficiency. So the form of exercise that really sends that signal is cardio. If I'm doing lots of cardiovascular activity, number one, I don't need much strength. So you don't need much strength to do cycling for long distances or running for long distances or swimming for long distances. What you need is a lot of stamina, but you definitely don't need a lot of muscle. You're also burning a lot of calories initially while you're doing that form of exercise. So what your body does is it tries to become a better cardio machine. So what it does is it pares muscle down, reduces your calorie burn to make you a more efficient cardio machine. It's really not unlike having an artificially intelligent car that adapted to your driving habits, right? So if I had an AI car and I drove it for 300 miles every single day at 20 miles an hour, it would it wouldn't need much power. It would use very, very little energy, and it would become very efficient. Well, this is what happens to your body when you do lots and lots of cardiovascular activity. Studies support this very clearly, by the way. When people lose weight with cardio, half of that weight roughly is muscle. So you lose 10 pounds, 5 pounds of that weight loss is muscle. Why is that not a good thing? Well, first off, I'm right around the same body fat I was before. So now I'm a smaller, same-ish kind of body fat percentage with a slower metabolism, okay? Now I've ended up with a slower metabolism because I'm more efficient. The weight loss with that strategy looks like this. Initially, I lose some weight, plateau real hard. My body has adapted, my metabolism has slowed down. At this point, people either add more cardio or eat less to get more to happen. I lose a little bit more, I plateau again as my body adapts even more. By the end of this process, if you lost 20 pounds, now you're eating very little calories, you're doing a lot of activity, and in order to maintain this weight loss. Totally unsustainable. Now let's look at resistance training or strength training. It doesn't burn nearly as many calories while you're doing it, but that's okay. That's not what's important. What's important is the adaptation. What is the main adaptation that resistance training and strength training is inducing in the body. It's telling your body to get stronger. It's telling your body to build muscle. The side effect of which is a faster metabolism, a less efficient metabolism. Remember, if we were back, if this was 10,000 years ago, it would probably be very beneficial to have a very efficient, slow metabolism. Food is very hard to come by. Today, it's the opposite. If you could make people's metabolism burn 5,000 calories a day, we probably wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. By the way, this is not speculation. This is all completely backed by studies. In fact, there was one study that I quote in the book done on modern hunter-gatherers. There's a tribe in northern Tanzania called the Hadza tribe, and they live like humans lived thousands of years ago. Like they're modern hunter-gatherers, so they're not on their phones, they don't have computers, they don't have televisions. They're very active in comparison to the average Westerner. They gather roots and nuts and seeds and fruit that they find, and they hunt. And the way they hunt is probably the way we all used to hunt thousands of years ago. They throw a spear, like I said earlier, hit the animal, and then run after it, right, until it falls from exhaustion. Then they rush it, kill it, and then bring it back. So researchers went and studied them, and through some pretty sophisticated testing, were able to test their metabolic rates. How many calories are these people burning every single day? And they were blown away by the results. At the end of the study, they realized that the Hadza tribes people were burning roughly similar amounts of calories to the average couch potato in America or Canada or the UK, right? The average Westerner. And at first they thought, how is this possible? But then it made perfect sense, right? It would be evolutionarily disadvantageous for hunter-gatherers to burn 7,000 calories a day. You're not going to find 7,000 calories in nature. Their bodies have become efficient through all that cardio, right? This is what we're doing to our bodies when we're going and doing lots of cardio, trying to lose weight. We're making it unsustainable for ourselves. So what does the weight loss look like with resistance training? It's more of a snowball effect. Initially, it starts off slow, but as you start to build muscle, fat starts to fall off your body, and your metabolism is faster at the end than it was in the beginning. By the way, the weight loss that you see on the scale when you're doing resistance training is body fat. You're not losing muscle. In fact, you oftentimes build muscle along with fat loss. So sometimes people in the first couple months notice the scale hasn't moved, but they feel their clothes are a little looser, like what's going on. Then you do a body fat test and you say, wow, you lost 5 pounds of body fat and you gained 5 pounds of muscle. Now, why did they lose size? Body fat is very voluminous in comparison to muscle. Muscle's dense, so 5 pounds of muscle takes up this much space, whereas 5 pounds of body fat might take up this much space. So resistance training is a sustainable approach because it teaches your body to burn more calories. But there's more to this. Because we're not relying on the calorie burn of resistance training, but rather its adaptation, you don't need to do it very often. In fact, the average person could get incredible muscle building and metabolism boosting effects from about 2 days a week of resistance training. Now, you're not going to look like a bodybuilder. Well, you wouldn't anyway, probably, even if you train like one. But 2 days a week would be plenty to give most people what they're looking for, which is strength, some sculpt, tone, right? That word tone, which means they're tighter, and a faster metabolism. You just don't need to do it as much. And this is great because when I trained lots of everyday average people, I got really good at getting people to be consistent with exercise forever. I mean, I have clients I haven't trained for 10 years that still exercise. But, and this is just true, the most we can hope for the average person, the most we can hope for is about 2, maybe 3 days a week of structured exercise. You're not going to get the average person to have structured exercise every single day. We can forget that. Our lives are extremely sedentary, but they're also extremely busy. So it's not like we're sedentary and then we have all this open space. We are busier today than we were 20 years ago. Every minute is scheduled and play dates are scheduled with kids, and I got work, and then I got these emails, and work follows me now wherever I'm at. And people also don't enjoy exercise like fitness fanatics do. It's not something they want to do every single day. So the most we can hope for is about 2 or 3 days a week, but that's fine with resistance training. That's actually all you need, you can get phenomenal, excellent results with it. But there's more too, Mike. One of my favorite aspects of resistance training is the permanence of the results you get from resistance training. Now, I want to be very clear. There's no such thing as permanent fitness in the sense that whatever you do to get in shape is probably what you're going to have to continue to do to stay in shape. However, strength training or resistance training gets about as close to permanence as you can get because of a phenomenon called muscle memory. This is well documented in studies. When you build muscle the first time, it may take a while, right? It may take a man, if we took the average man and had him start now with resistance training, and he does a very good job, he may gain in that first year about 10 pounds of lean muscle, okay, which result in a much faster metabolism, tighter body, leaner physique, better health, better insulin resistance, all those things. But he'll gain about 10 pounds. Let's say he stops exercising for 2 months for some reason, or 3 months. Maybe he gets sick or injured, and he loses all 10 pounds of that lean body mass. And then he decides he wants to get back to it. He'll gain that 10 pounds back in about a month. It might have taken him a year to gain it the first time. To gain it back, it comes back very quickly. And to lose it in the first place is quite slow. In fact, if you stop resistance training, that muscle lingers on your body for weeks. Whereas the adaptations you may get from cardiovascular activity go very quickly. You were a high-level cyclist. I bet your endurance suffered quickly when you stopped cycling. Totally. Within a few days. Yep. When it comes to resistance training, oftentimes you take a week off, you come back, you're even stronger. Yep. So it has all of the makings of the perfect form of exercise for the problems that we're encountering here in modern societies. And unfortunately, we've been sold the wrong bill of goods, and we've been told not to do it, or that's not the best form of exercise, which is a complete travesty. You do strength training, resistance training as a cornerstone of your routine, and you do it right, you'll get better results than you ever did with any other form of exercise.
I'm with you 100%. Isn't it funny how we focus so much on the fuel being oxidized? You mentioned a lot about calories, and I totally agree and resonate with you. And people are focused on, you hop on a treadmill or an elliptical or a stair climber, it tells you how much energy you're burning. Yeah. It doesn't tell you the power you're putting out normally. Like that's coming now. We're seeing wattage, on these cardio machines, which is a much better objective measure of like how much intensity you're putting into it. But we focus so much on fat oxidation, right? With the whole keto movement and being fat adapted, I promoted that and have benefited from that. But we focus on cardio because you're burning fat while you're training. Whereas, if you're lifting weights, you're burning mostly glucose. But in the post-exercise window, that's where the magic happens. So building up, and you talk a lot about this in the book, this buffer, this metabolic engine, so to speak, because muscle's so metabolically active. And that's, I think, the really important point for people. Yet it's the exact hesitance for women is they're like, well, I don't want too much muscle. I don't want to be bulky. Yeah. But so how do you sort of frame that with some women? Like, hey, you're going to speed up your metabolism, but you're not going to look super bulky.
Yeah. You know what's funny about that? So I've managed gyms. I managed gyms for years. It's one of the things I did. One of my favorite things I did in the fitness industry. I would grand open these big box gyms, and I worked for 24 Hour Fitness. Then I owned my own for a while. And that was always a common objection, right? So one of my jobs as a gym manager, among other things, was to increase the sales of memberships and personal training. And so oftentimes if a new guest came in and my salespeople were busy, I would take the guest on a tour and I'd show them around. And so I'd take, Mrs. Johnson, right? So you're talking about the women who are afraid of building muscles. I'd take Mrs. Johnson, I'd take her through the gym, and we'd, stop at the cardio. Oh, I like this. Oh, that's a new treadmill. Oh, I like this elliptical. And we'd see the aerobics classes. Oh, this looks fun. I want to try Zumba. Then we go to the machines and the free weights. I'm not really interested in this. I'm not trying to get big. And I would explain the benefits, and I talk a lot about what you hear me talking about now, but they would still be very, very resistant. Then we'd go back to my office. I used to love doing this. It was a very effective communication tool and technique. And to be quite frank, it was a very effective sales technique. We would sit down and I'd say, I tell you what, I have a scale in my office. I'm going to call one of my female trainers in here. If you can guess her weight within 10 pounds, I'll give you a free membership for the next 3 months. Do you want to try this? And oftentimes they'd say, yeah, I'll take that bet all day long. No problem. So then I would call in, and there was one trainer in particular that I think about whenever I talk about the story, that I would call into my office. So I'd get on my intercom, attention staff, so-and-so, please come to Sal's office. In would walk in my 5'3", sculpted, lean, curvy trainer, right? So great physique, nice arms, nice glutes, nice hamstrings. In she would walk, and I'd say, okay, guess her weight within 10 pounds, and you'll get a free membership. And they would say, oh, she weighs 105 pounds or 110 pounds, or sometimes I'd hear 95 pounds because she was tiny, about 5'2". So I'd say, okay, let me have you stand on the scale now. She'd stand on the scale, and she was 130 pounds or 135 pounds. And it would blow their mind. Like, is your scale broken? And I'd say, no, you can stand on the scale, test it out. And they would do it, and they'd see that it wasn't broken. I'd say, the reason why she looks like she weighs 110 pounds, but she weighs 130 pounds is because she's lean and she has a lot of muscle. She looks the way a lot of women want to look because the curves, the sculpt, the tightness that we're all looking for comes from muscle. It comes from muscle. And muscle, again, is very dense. It doesn't take up much space. Then the second part of this, which was hilarious, is I would ask my trainer in front of this potential new member, what did you eat for breakfast? And she'd say, oh, I had a 4-egg omelet with cheese, 3 slices of sourdough toast, and some bacon. Okay, what did you have for lunch? I had a chicken burrito from, Unamos and some tortilla chips. And I'd say, okay, she can eat that much because of that fat burning machinery that she has on her body called muscle. Her body is burning a lot of calories right now. She's not even moving, but her body is burning a tremendous amount of calories right now just talking to us. And that would always sell a membership with personal training because the person then had the visual. Oh my God, I can't believe this person. Look, if you look at me, for example, I weigh 205 pounds, right? A lot of people would guess I weighed a lot less, especially people who don't understand fitness. Muscle is dense. Fat is voluminous. Forget the scale. If right now, if you're watching this and you're a female and I put 5 pounds of muscle on your body, you would not feel any bigger. You would just feel tighter. If I put 5 pounds of body fat on your body, you would notice that you were bigger and you took up more space. To put it differently, if I were to take 10 pounds of body fat off your body and put 10 pounds of muscle on your body, you would be much smaller. And you'd have this metabolism that all of a sudden you could eat more and burn it off, right? So that's what we need to communicate to these women. Instead, what they've been talked to and told is you need to weigh less. Weight, by the way, is a metric that takes nothing into account. I could cut my leg off and lose weight, obviously. So it's just what the scale says. Doesn't really tell you a whole lot. Doesn't tell you about your health or your body composition or your size or your fitness or how good you look with your clothes off. Doesn't tell you any of those things. It just tells you a number. We're also telling women, don't lift weights, or if you do 1,000,000 reps, use lightweight. You don't want to get bulky. Here, do this class over here. It creates long, lean-looking muscles, as if you could lengthen your muscles with exercise. Your muscles' length is determined by your genetics. It's just your attachments are here and here, and that's it. Unless you could surgically remove them, you're not going to change anything. So they've been lied to completely. The word toned? The word toned was invented by the fitness industry. Muscles don't tone. Muscles build or they shrink. That's what they do. Toning, which we understand it to be tighter, right? Oh, my muscles are tighter, therefore they're toned. Small amounts of building create that feeling of tighter. So when you say toned, what you're really saying is building. The fitness industry did this because they weren't making very much money selling gym memberships because they weren't tapping into the half of the consumer base, or better stated, the most important consumer base, which is the female consumer base. They're the biggest consumers in the world. They said, how can we attract them? Well, we can't say build muscle. We got to say toned. And then what we're going to do, and this was in the early days of gyms. I remember that one of the first gyms that I ever ran was a gym that was built in the 80s. And they had a women's area. And in the women's area, they had the same machines that they had in the men's area. The only difference was the upholstery was pink and the weight stacks didn't go up very much. And they had dumbbells in there too, but they only went up to 10 pounds and they were, again, pink and purple. And they were encouraged to do thousands of reps, basically do cardio with weights because, we don't want to make you
too big
and bulky. No, so your best bet, if you want a tight, sculpted physique And you want to make it so that it's easier to burn body fat. Because here's the deal. You could choose to burn calories manually, or you could choose to burn calories automatically. Would you like a body that burns calories on its own? If that's what you want to do, you want to train to build muscle. And by the way, if you are that 0.0001% of the population that's got those muscle building genes that just are super, super rare, still train this way because it doesn't happen overnight, no matter what. And if you do get to the point where you look in the mirror and you go, you know what? That's about as far as I want to go with my sculpting my body. Then you can back off and train differently. But it won't happen overnight, no matter what.
Right. And if that is you, if you were that 0.01% or whatever, take advantage of it, man. I would exploit that. Like I was just yesterday with Marcus Philly. Have you met him? He's
No.
in San Francisco area. He is like that, like obviously he puts in the work,
Yeah.
but just looking, you can see delt striations and
Yeah.
everything. And he's in his late 30s. And yeah, it's like he's exploiting it. You might as well run with it. I mean, if so those people I think would have naturally over time gravitated towards bodybuilding or fitness or whatever, if they're that type. So I love that approach. Now you talk about CNS fatigue and CNS sort of stimulation as being one of the many different adaptive mechanisms. So, a lot of people, they're like, okay, I'm going to go lift weights. They're hitting bicep curls and all that. And I love bicep curls, but that's at the end after you've done a lot of different things. So can we talk about the value of multi-joint compound movements versus sort of isometric, or not isometric, but isolation exercises for people to help to think through, when they, and of course you have all the stuff in the book, but how do you reframe that so people understand the value there?
Yeah. So once we've made the case and someone says, okay, I'm going to do resistance training, but there's a million exercises to choose from. There's, 5 different variations of each exercise. Which ones are the best? Not all resistance training exercises are created equal. Some are very effective and others are not nearly as effective when it comes to that muscle building, metabolism boosting, body sculpting effect. The exercises that tend to be the most effective are known as these gross motor movement compound type exercises that mimic functional or foundational human movement, right? So squats. So a squat is a very effective exercise. Let's say you want to build your butt. Let's say you're a woman. You're like, I want to sculpt my butt. Rather than doing, donkey kickbacks on the floor or, putting an ankle weight on and lifting your leg out to the side, squats are going to build your butt way faster and more effectively than that exercise, right? Overhead presses, bench presses, barbell rows. These are the movements that deadlifts, right? Lunges, right? These are the movements that are the most effective bang for your buck exercises. Again, if you're going to the gym 2 or 3 days a week, you want to do the ones that give you the most bang for your buck. Now, isolation exercises definitely have their place, especially if you're trying to correct an imbalance or connect to a muscle that you feel like maybe isn't firing very well, or maybe as a way to add more volume to your workouts. But the compound lifts, by far, for my everyday clients, we would do some isolation movement, but 90% plus of the workouts revolved around squatting, deadlifting, pressing, rowing, overhead pressing, lunging, lateral lunging. Like those are the movements that we would focus the most on. Now you brought up the central nervous system, right? Which that's the brain and the spinal cord. You want to think of the central nervous system as think of it as an amplifier, and then think of your muscles as speakers. Okay, so if you have a sound system, you got your speakers, you got your amplifier. The speakers can be big and powerful and awesome and high tech, but if you have a weak amp, barely any sound is going to come out of those speakers. That's like your muscles, right? Your muscles, they can contract, they have function, they can be very strong and stable. But if your amplifier, your central nervous system, isn't firing strong, adequately, clean and clear, then it really doesn't make a big difference. So to go a little deeper in that, let's talk about stretching. And I promise this will make sense. So let's say I go stretch my hamstrings. I got tight hamstrings. I go to touch my toes. Oh, I can barely get down to my shins. But I sit and I stretch for 30 minutes. Within that 30-minute period of time, I will improve the flexibility of my hamstrings. We've all experienced this, right? You stretch 30 seconds into a stretch, a minute into a stretch, ooh, I can go another inch or two further. Okay, your hamstring muscle did not become longer, nor did it become more pliable like rubber would if you warmed it up in the heat. That's not what's happening. What's happening is your central nervous system is feeling safe with elongating that muscle. Holding that stretch over time tells my central nervous system, at first it's tight because it's protecting. And then as I hold the stretch, it's like, okay, we can relax a little bit, and it starts to loosen things up. So that's the central nervous system that's doing that. The central nervous system controls everything, including how your muscles fire, your strength, how you stabilize yourself. When you do resistance training, a lot of the adaptations happen from the central nervous system. As you learn the exercise, as the muscles fire more efficiently, that's coming from the central nervous system. Now, why is this a good thing? The central nervous system becomes more efficient and effective. Now your muscles can start to really build and really become, more fit. So it's a wonderful, good thing. There's a side effect that comes from that too, called proprioceptive ability or proprioception, right? This is knowing where I am in space. So, and as you get older, this becomes a big deal, right? People start to lose their balance. They step the wrong way. They fall down. It's oftentimes because they lack strength, and also because their proprioceptive ability starts to fail a little bit. One of the beauties of resistance training is it's not the same motion over and over again. If you run, it's the same thing over and over again. If I cycle, it's the same. Resistance training, you are encouraged to train in different planes, in front of me, to the side, rotating above my head. You're encouraged to move in different angles. I'm also encouraged to be present. I can ride a bike or run and lose myself in thought, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes that's valuable. But when I'm in a set of squats or deadlifts, I'm there. I'm focusing on my form. I have to feel the muscle. And a set isn't so long that I'm going to lose myself in thoughts anyway. It's 25 seconds or whatever. So it encourages presence, and it strengthens proprioceptive ability because of the different angles. So when you see the studies on balance improvement, in fact, if you go to a physical therapist because you had a stroke or you fell because you lost your balance, the primary form of exercise they use to rehab you is resistance training. Now, typically it doesn't have weights involved because they're starting at a very low level, but they use things like bands, body weight, intrinsic tension with muscle, flexion. That's because it's very effective at doing those things, and it does train the central nervous system in very, very remarkable ways.
So I want to expand upon that. So is that part of the value of the compound movements, because you're just adding more shear load to your central nervous system, causing different muscles to be innervated and more nerves to fire? Is that, if we were compared to sort of these isolation exercises, is that part of it?
Part of it. It's a bit of a mystery, but that's probably what's going on. Because I'm using so much muscle, so much focus is going from my central nervous system to do this squat versus just this leg extension. There's a much louder adaptation signal that's going to my body that's saying, we need strength, we need muscle. This is a big movement. This is very important for us. This is a bigger stress on the body. So that's part of it. The other part of it could be the tension. I think if you're squatting 300 pounds, you're probably producing more tension on individual muscles than you would if you isolated them. Like, I don't know anybody that could, leg extension 300 pounds, right? So that's probably the other part of it. There's also a hormonal response that we see from resistance training, both immediate and long-term. In the immediate, route, compound lifts spike testosterone and growth hormone and improve insulin sensitivity very quickly. You can measure it within hours. And when they compare it to isolation exercises, there's a much bigger impact. But if we talk long-term, and by the way, this is probably one of the best selling points, I would say, to the average person when it comes to resistance training. Resistance training is the only pro-tissue form of exercise that exists. Other forms of exercise are anti-tissue. So if I'm doing lots of cardio, the adaptation has become more efficient, reduce muscle mass, reduce some body fat, but also reduce muscle mass. Okay. When I'm doing resistance training, the primary adaptation is build muscle. Now, of course, the side effect of that is you get leaner, you get a faster metabolism, all that stuff. But the primary signal is build this active tissue. Now, think of all the hormones that are required to make that happen, right? In men, it's testosterone. In both men and women, it's growth hormone. In both men and women, it's insulin sensitivity. Insulin is actually a quite anabolic hormone when utilized in a healthy way. In women, it's a balance of estrogen and progesterone. So because I'm sending this signal to my body to build muscle, my body starts producing a more youthful array of hormones. Or in other words, I'm getting youthful levels of all of these hormones because my body knows it needs to build muscle. In fact, if you just gave testosterone to a man, he would build muscle without even having to work out. So your body's like, we need to build muscle. In order to make this happen, we need these hormones to be like this. We need cortisol to drop down. That's the other one, is cortisol starts to drop down. Now, what do the studies say? They're very clear. No form of exercise reliably raises testosterone in men like resistance training. No form of, in fact, cardiovascular exercise in some studies reliably lowers testosterone. Probably again because it's trying to get the body to lose muscle to become more efficient. And it's hard to lose muscle in a high testosterone environment. So the body lowers testosterone. Here's a great one. This one's for men. This one's awesome. You know, they just did some recent studies on testosterone levels and the ability of men to build strength and muscle. And what they found was there was a small correlation between testosterone levels and the ability to build muscle, as we would predict. But it wasn't a huge effect. There was a very big correlation and connection to androgen receptor density and the ability to build muscle. Now, what is that, right? Androgen receptors are what testosterone attaches to. Okay. The more androgen receptors you have, the more effective your testosterone is, regardless of your levels. If you have a lot of androgen receptors, low testosterone acts like high testosterone. Resistance training reliably increases androgen receptor density in both men and women. Why is this a good thing for women, by the way? Low testosterone or low androgen receptors in women cause the same negative effects that low testosterone or low negative androgen receptor density causes in men. Now, of course, the levels are far different. Men have, far more testosterone than women, but low testosterone in women. And by the way, you're starting to see the popularity of hormone therapy in women with testosterone, because low testosterone in women, just like in men, low libido, low confidence, low energy, low drive, decreased quality in life. When women who have low testosterone supplement with testosterone, or ideally find ways to raise it naturally, resistance training being one of the best ways to do so, they notice more libido, more confidence, better drive, more ambition, like all of those same effects you see in men, you see in women. So this is a good thing. You want androgen receptor density in your body. It makes it so much easier to keep and maintain muscle, and it makes it so much easier to have a faster metabolism.
If I can get your body to build muscle, we could start to move your body in a more advantageous position from a few different standpoints. One, it becomes more metabolically advantageous, okay? Muscle burns calories, and if I can get your body to burn more calories, later on it's gonna be easier to sustain because you can eat more and maintain a leaner body. Speed up your metabolism, if you will. I know there's a lot of debate and discussion about how much you can speed up your metabolism, and we have studies that show that a pound of muscle only burns, let's say, X amount of calories, and some people argue it's more than that. I think it's far more complex than people realize. Yes, muscle by itself burns more calories, but there is a flexibility, a metabolic flexibility that exists within our bodies with the current lean body mass that we have. Okay, so you can take somebody, have them gain no muscle or lose no muscle, maintain the same lean body mass, but through other methods, through sleep, changes in hormones, behaviors, what kind of signals you're sending your body. Do you want it to build muscle? Do you want it to conserve calories? You can burn more or less calories. And then on top of that, you have just the fact that more muscle burns more calories because it's so metabolically active in comparison to other tissues of the body. Like body fat's very easy to maintain. Muscle, much more expensive from a caloric standpoint. So when I get the person to start building muscle, I'm starting to also speed up the metabolism in that process, as we start to talk about nutrition, the goal is not to take things away, but rather to add things to start to fuel or support, I should say, that new strength and that new muscle. Also, there's a behavioral component to that with the nutrition component, which is, behaviorally speaking, people tend to be better, or it tends to be more successful telling someone to add something to their diet than it is to tell them to take away. Now, I know people who understand calories probably listening and saying that makes no sense. You want someone to lose weight, you're telling them to eat more. And I'm going to say yes, but it's a bit of a sneaky approach. So to give you an example, I would tell somebody, we're not going to cut your calories, but what I want you to do is I want you to eat 30 grams of protein with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I want you to eat that first, and then eat whatever else you want afterwards. Now, I know as a trainer, and I'm sure you know this as well, and we know this now, the literature is pretty clear, that protein is extremely satiety producing. It fills you up. It makes you not want to eat anymore. It also tends to regulate blood sugar, and blood sugar fluctuations tend to cause behavioral changes that tend to make us want to either overeat or eat things that tend to be hyperpalatable, which then contribute to overeating. So I would tell them to aim for 30 grams of protein and eat that first. And without them realizing it, they would end up eating less calories overall. Plus, they get the protein that they need to fuel that muscle growth. There's also a confidence that comes from seeing objective progress in the gym, where yesterday you could do 2 push-ups and today now you could do 3 or 4. I would make sure to paint the picture for the client or point this out. And I would say things like, last week you were able to, lift 50 pounds and this week you were able to lift 60 pounds. Do you know what that means? And they would say, well, I'm stronger. I said, yes, but fundamentally it means you're a different person. You're not the same person you were last week. That's very powerful for somebody who's trying to change themselves in fundamental ways. And then there's the hormonal component that comes from the process of building muscle. And we can get into the weeds with this, but the one that I like to focus on has most to do with insulin sensitivity. Muscle is very insulin sensitive. In fact, there's studies that they've done with obese individuals where they have them lose no weight. They simply have them gain some muscle, and we see significant improvements in insulin sensitivity. Muscle is a place where we store glycogen, right? We could store those carbohydrates and sugars that we eat. It's also insulin sensitive because insulin has an anabolic effect to it. So when you build some muscle, you become more insulin sensitive. Becoming more insulin sensitive means you're going to have less of those ups and downs. And we know those ups and downs affect how we feel. And a big thing that we don't focus on when we talk about nutrition, that I learned a lot as a trainer, was how food makes you feel is paramount. Because I could tell you what to eat all day long. I could give you the perfect amount of calories, grams of proteins, fats, carbohydrates. I could tell you all those things. But if you have a relationship with food where if you feel irritable, tired, depressed, sad, whatever, you reach for something to comfort yourself. Well, if I can get you to feel a little bit better, you're more likely to make decisions, conscious decisions. Eventually you'll become unconscious, so you could develop patterns. But initially, you're more likely to develop or to make choices that are better for you. And so this was the beginning of the process, So you come hire me, I want to lose 30 pounds, and I'm going to tell you, we're going to do that. But first, let's focus on getting you strong. And then from there, we'll see what happens. And it was a far more successful approach.
So many powerful takeaways in that. I'd love to tease a few of those things out. But
Sure.
First, I want to start off with this, is that some people might be looking at you if they're watching on YouTube. They might be thinking, okay, great, this guy's training other guys. But you told me while we were chatting initially that actually most of your clients initially to start were women.
Yes, vast
and so
majority.
This is something that is not just for men, but this is something that you've had proven experience with women in as well.
Yeah, no, I would say over the two and a half decades of training people and managing gyms, probably 70 to 80% of my clients were female. I didn't train in bodybuilder gyms. I had some athletes that I worked with, But the vast majority of people I trained were everyday people. So these were big Globo gyms that I managed and ran. These were people who had families and kids, and they worked and they want to lose weight and feel better. And they hired me and I worked with them. So that's the vast majority of my experience. You know, what's interesting about the comment that you made, which, you know, I want to touch on, and this is just, it's very common. We've done a mass, and I say we, the fitness industry, has done a massive disservice to women. We have painted one of the most effective and powerful and just easiest to sustain forms of exercise as a form of exercise for men who want to build big muscles. This is what bodybuilders do. This is what athletes do. All you other people want to be fit, healthy, and just lose weight. Don't pay attention to this. That other stuff is for those extreme, you know, meatheads, for example. And that's terrible because, you know, men and women have both been lied to by the fitness industry, but women far more so. I mean, I remember the first gym that I became a trainer of at the age of 18. I walked in there. This was a 24-hour fitness in San Jose, and it was one of their flagship clubs. And I remember walking in there, getting hired, and there was a women's only area within the gym. They used to do this in gyms back in the 80s and 90s, right? And I walked into the women's area for the first time because now I'm a trainer, so I can go throughout the whole gym. And the equipment in there was identical to the equipment that was out into the general floor. The difference was the upholstery was pink, and the dumbbells were covered in like some, you know, like pink or purple rubber. And I remember thinking, even this as an 18-year-old trainer, how condescending that we're telling women this is where they need to work out, and all we did was color it pink. And I remember the information that was communicated, you still hear this a lot to women, was, you know, don't lift weights like this because you'll get big and bulky and masculine. What you should do is grab those 2-pound dumbbells, do 5,000 reps, feel the burn. This is going to develop, you know, sculpted, toned, you know, long, lean looking muscles. By the way, I love saying this. This always gets people if they haven't heard this before. Toned, the way that the fitness industry uses it, is a completely invented, made up marketing term. Now, toned exists as a word. It just means a muscle's ability to contract, but tone, the way we use it, is like, it's different than building somehow. Like toning means you don't have big muscles. They're just nice and firm. Muscles build or they shrink. They don't tone. Toning is just building to a smaller degree. So really what we're telling women to do is build muscle, but we just repackaged it in a way that was easier to sell. And then we changed workouts so that they weren't so afraid of maybe looking like, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that. But no, the majority of my clients were women. I loved, you know, shattering their paradigms around exercise and how to approach it. And I became very successful in doing so, in creating behaviors and routines for people that they were able to maintain. And my favorite comment that I would get from people, I love hearing this, and it became quite common after, was they would come to me and say, Sal, I'm getting leaner, but I don't feel like I'm working that hard. Like, this is really weird. Like, what's happening? How is my body working this way? And I tell them, I say, you know, the difference is what you did before, or what you were doing before, is you were fighting against your body. And every time your body would send you a signal that what you were doing wasn't working so well, you just pushed it harder. What we're doing is we're working with your body's natural abilities to adapt. We understand how they work. We work with them so that the time you do spend in here is effective and efficient, and we're getting your metabolism and your hormones to work in a way to where you don't have to kill yourself every day in the gym. You don't have to starve yourself every day to try to be fit and healthy. This is something that's sustainable. So again, one of my favorite things to hear from people is that quote right there.
That's incredible. You know, some of what I'm really hearing from you, and having kind of gone deep into your content over the last month as I've been anticipating this interview, is that both for men and women, but in particular, I had shared with you that my audience skews female, that if you are really serious about wanting to lose a little bit of weight, and that obviously fits into the conversation of body composition.
Yes.
Because anybody could lose weight just by not eating for a short period of time, or just way too much fasting, which is not good for you. But if you're serious about body composition, which the fat loss being a part of that and building muscle, if you're not strength training in some capacity, and we'll go through that. I'd love to hear, like, if somebody's just started, okay, if they have a little bit of experience, what's the best approach to that? We'll get to that in a second. You're really doing yourself a disservice because your only levers that you're pulling are, the diet side of things, and maybe a little bit of stress if people are paying attention to that as well, right? You're doing yourself a disservice because you're not taking advantage of the fact that muscle does all these things that you talked about before.
Yeah, so let's talk about weight for a second, because people are so focused on the scale, especially women, because we've looked at that number, and that number to us means something. I used to love telling people this. It's, I want to lose weight. And I'd say, okay, what kind of weight? And they'd look at me like, what are you talking about? So, well, we could cut your leg off and you'd lose weight, but that's obviously not the weight that you want to lose. Now, of course, that's an extreme example, but body composition is what matters. If you took a 150-pound woman at 35% body fat, let's say 5'4", and you took another woman who was 5'4", 150 pounds, but her body fat percentage would say 20%, same body weight, they would look vastly different. They wouldn't even look the same. In fact, most people would guess that the 20-something% body fat female weighed a lot less. This is because muscle takes up less space than body fat on a pound for pound basis. Something like if you were to lose 10 pounds of body fat now and gain 10 pounds of body fat, 10 pounds of muscle, so replace 10 pounds of body fat with 10 pounds of muscle, you would lose roughly a quarter of the size of your body, okay? So you weigh the same, but you're a lot smaller. But there's more to it than just that. That muscle obviously makes you more mobile, so that's great. You're stronger, more functional, feels different on the body, looks very different on the body. It improves your hormone profile. So it balances out things like estrogen and progesterone, growth hormone, helps modulate cortisol, so it's more appropriate. It helps regulate testosterone, which is also important in women, not just in men. By the way, testosterone in women, same functions that you find in men. It helps with motivation. It helps with, feeling drive, libido, energy, those types of things. So that muscle does a lot of things, but you weigh the same, right? You weigh the same. I used to have this trainer that worked for me, this female trainer that I used to use, and we used to laugh about this. She was like one of my favorite sales tools because I would get a potential member of the gym that I'd give a tour to, and let's say it was a woman, and we would talk about the gym, and sometimes they'd say, oh, I'm not interested in the weights at all. I just want the machine, the cardio and the aerobics classes. And we talk all about strength training, and I'd explain to them, and they'd still be like, no, I'm not interested. And then I would do this challenge. I'd say, okay, I'm going to call in one of my trainers, and if you could guess her body weight within 10 pounds, I'll give you a free membership for the next 3 months. And they would say, I'll take that challenge. And I'd page this trainer, and then she would walk in. She was like 5'2", very sculpted, very fit. And I'd say, guess her body weight. And they would all guess like 100 pounds, 110 pounds. Then I'd have her stand on the scale, and I forgot how much she weighs, like 135 pounds. It always blow their mind. And I'd say, muscle and body fat look very, very different. So the scale just tells you total body mass. It doesn't tell you, what it's made up of. So I want to explain that, because as we talk about muscle, I know people who are trying to lose weight, when they hear more muscle, to them, they just feel like, I'm going to get bigger.
Okay, I'm going to be a bigger version of me, just with more muscle.
Yeah. No, it doesn't work that way. Now let's talk about the weight loss approach. The weight loss approach, if you look at it from its absolute most basic viewpoint, it's a calories in versus calories out equation. Now, it's obviously far more complex than this. Okay. The human metabolism or mammalian metabolism is extremely complex, and calories in versus calories out is like telling somebody who is in poverty, just make more money and save more money, right? It's like way more complex than just that, but that part's still true. So the calories in versus calories out, that is true. What it makes up of, or what contributes to it, is very complex. But let's talk about calories in versus calories out. We understood that equation for a long time. And so we said, okay, we're dealing with an obesity epidemic. People want to lose weight. We need to reduce their calories and we need to have them burn more calories. So the calorie reduction part, let's have them eat less. Okay, that's what they said with diet. And we can get into that, but there's far more effective and less effective ways of doing that. But then they looked at the calories outside of the equation. And what they said was, okay, movement burns calories. So let's look at all the forms of exercise. And the most valuable ones would be the ones that burn the most calories. And that's what we're going to tell people to do. And it sounds like it makes sense, right? Like, okay, if I'm trying to lose weight, trying to burn more calories, I should just pick the form of exercise that burns the most calories. The problem with that is it completely negates a very important factor with exercise, which is exercise gets your body to adapt. And those adaptations mean a lot. They mean a lot, okay? So if I pick a form of exercise that just gets me to burn a lot of calories, let's say running, that's phenomenal. Now I'm burning a lot of calories, except my body's adaptation process is going to say this: we need more endurance, we need more stamina, we need to conserve more calories. We got to be able to do this activity well and more efficiently. That's what your body is trying to do with that form of exercise. So you build stamina and endurance. You don't need much muscle at all for stamina and endurance. In fact, you need very little muscle for that. So what your body does to become more efficient or slow down its metabolism, lower its calorie requirements, is it actually starts to pare muscle down, especially when you combine it with low calories. And the studies are very clear on this. You diet and you run a lot, or you diet and you do tons of, let's say, calorie burning activity, you see weight loss, but a significant portion of that weight loss is muscle. Now, there's a misconception that you're burning the muscle for energy. That's not what's happening. Your body doesn't like to burn muscle for energy, except in extreme situations. What it's doing is it's just paring it down. It's becoming more efficient. This is why, and by the way, almost everybody who's ever tried to lose weight has probably tried that approach. They've experienced the following: that initial 10-pound weight loss and then hard plateau. What happened? I'm doing 3 days or 4 days a week of this activity. I'm eating this low calorie diet. Why did I plateau? What happened? Well, what happened was your body adapted and learned how to perform and operate on the lower calories and on the calories that you're burning with that activity. And it's very, very intelligent on how it adapts to that. Okay. There was this incredible study that was done. They actually went and studied a modern hunter-gatherer tribe, the Hadza tribe. I'm sure you're familiar with it because people talk about it all the time. And scientists went down and studied them, and through some sophisticated testing, were able to figure out how many calories they burned on a regular basis. Now, remember, these are hunter-gatherers, okay? So they don't have TVs and iPhones, and they got to go hunt their food. They have to gather. They have to get water. They're far more active than the average Westerner. What they found at the end of the study was that they burned roughly the same amount of calories that the average Western couch potato burns. And you think, well, how's that possible? Well, that's how we evolved. If humans burned 6,000 or 7,000 calories a day as hunter-gatherers, we wouldn't be here. It is very hard to find calories in nature until we learned agriculture, and we live in modern. Now it's easy. Calories are really easy to find. But if you go out in the wilderness and you got to hunt for your food and gather your food, you're not going to find 6,000 calories a day. Their body's adapted. So that's essentially what we're doing when we apply the wrong strategy to try to lose weight. Our bodies quickly adapt and nothing happens. And then what we do is we try to do more of the same. Well, I guess I need to do more exercise. I guess I need to cut my calories even more. Then you lose another 7 pounds and you plateau again. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how unsustainable this is. Well, what do I end up at the end of this journey? I lost 30 pounds, but I'm eating 1,100 calories a day, and 5 days a week, I'm on the treadmill for an hour. Most people don't want to do that forever. Or if they stop for a month, everything comes back on.
It's miserable.
Miserable. So what we should do with our approach with exercise is this. What form of exercise, forget the calorie burn while I'm doing the exercise, because that's inconsequential anyway. What kind of exercise is going to do the opposite? Like, what form of exercise is going to teach my body or encourage my body to adapt in a way where it becomes less efficient with calories, where it wants to burn more calories on its own, where I don't have to constantly move to try to make this happen? Well, that's strength training. Nothing does it like strength training. the process of building muscle and having the extra muscle itself. By the way, it's not just the muscle. It's also the signal to build more muscle, both of which teach my body to burn more calories. And I would see this all the time with clients. I'd have a client who would lose 30 pounds and at the end of their weight loss journey was eating more than they did when they started. And here's the other side of strength training that's phenomenal. You don't need to do a lot of it. With strength training, the primary benefit is the adaptation, not the calorie burn. And for most people, that looks like a couple days a week, you know? Now, if you want to move into advanced strength training and really push yourself and compete in strength sports and all that stuff, well, then you're going to need more than that. But for the average person, you can get really far with what I'm talking about with like 2 days a week of appropriate strength training. So now I lost 30 pounds. I'm in the gym 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, and I'm eating more than I did before. That is a sustainable approach. That's the approach that I try to communicate on my podcast, and that's the one I learned with my clients.
I want to talk about the nutrition element, the nutrition aspect, and the supplement. And there's a bunch of different things here. You're a big intuitive eating guy.
Yes.
Okay, I don't understand. Like, to me, like, it doesn't make any. Like, how is that even? That doesn't even sound possible.
It sounds silly.
It sounds like. I mean, yeah. In theory, again, it sounds great.
Yeah.
But how do people just like?
I'll make it make sense for you.
Okay.
So I'll use an example. There's now several studies that show that so great studies, by the way, they'll take groups of people and they'll divide them up and they're controlled. They're really controlled. So they literally keep them in laboratories and they'll say, okay, this group over here has unlimited access to heavily processed food. This group over here has unlimited access to whole natural foods. And they control the macros and everything. So, okay, they're very similar macro breakdown. The only difference is processed foods. Processed foods are in wrappers, bags, boxes. Unprocessed foods, whole foods are like, you know, chicken, bananas, nuts, whatever. And they say, okay, eat until you're full or whatever, and we're going to track. And then what they do after a certain period of time is they switch them. They take these people, they put them over there, take these people, put them over there. So it's a crossover study. And there's several of these now. And they find that when people eat heavily processed foods, on average, they eat 500 to 600 more calories a day. So 500 to 600 more calories a day eating heavily processed foods. Now, why is that? Heavily processed foods are engineered to make you eat more. And there's a lot of money that goes into doing this. A bag of Lay's potato chips has about 4 potatoes in it. And I could eat that no problem one sitting.
I saw this in your book, the potato thing.
Yeah,
right?
but if you give me 4, or 5 plain potatoes to eat, it would be very difficult, right?
Yeah.
So what does that have to do with intuitive eating? Well, if we're in a situation where we know how to read our body's signals, we have a good relationship with food. By the way, this is easier said than done. We can talk about what this looks like. So
I literally have in my notes, this seems easier said than done.
Right. So, do I have a good relationship with food, and how do I build that? Do I understand my body's signals and what it's telling me? A lot of people they don't even know what their body's sending them signals. They just accept that they have heartburn every day or whatever, right? So, body signals, good relationship with food. Do I understand food for all of its value other than its palatability? So we're in a society where we value food for palatability. How good does it taste and how pleasurable is it to eat? I mean, if you ask your friends, hey, where do you want to go to lunch? That's what you consider, right? Okay, so if you understand those 3 things, then you will naturally eat in a way that promotes health. Now, you're not going to get shredded. You're not going to look like you're a bikini model or whatever, but you're not going to be obese. You're probably not even going to be overweight.
Yes.
You're going to eat in a way that is naturally healthy. Now, how do we get there? It's a bit of a process. Okay, so let's start with a relationship with food. Okay, oftentimes we grab food and we eat food in ways that are impulsive, that resemble almost binge-like behavior. So to give you an example, it would be like if I'm eating like I use potato chips a lot because that's my favorite thing, right?
I love that, yeah.
So let's say I'm eating potato chips and I'm chewing on a chip. I'm not even enjoying this one. I'm just thinking about the one that's in my hand, right?
Okay, so
Does that happen to you even?
everybody.
It happens to me
That's what these
constantly.
foods are designed to do.
Right.
And listen, I grew up in this same society you did, where as kids, this is how we value food.
Yeah.
This is what all it is. So
It's also social.
Yes,
You know? The social
yes.
element.
So, okay, so how do I develop a better relationship with food with that kind of stuff? Well, first we need to create barriers between me and those behaviors so that I can become more aware. So, potato chips for me is a trigger food. I'm not going to have them in the house. I'm not going to say I can't eat them though. If I want some, I have to drive to the store. What does that do? At least create some space for me to maybe bring some awareness. What's another thing I can do? Not eat when I'm distracted. Okay, so don't eat while I'm looking at my phone. Don't eat while I'm watching TV. Don't eat while I'm listening to something. Just eat. Studies will show people eat 15% less calories just naturally, just from doing that, naturally.
I thought even more actually.
Oh,
I mean,
I would bet it's more.
Yeah.
But the studies will show about 15, which is, I mean, that's significant. If you're eating 2,000 calories, it's hundreds of calories a day.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Well, I mean, I can eat forever if I'm watching a movie or like popcorn. If you go to a movie and
That's
you
right.
get, like you can have like 3 tubs of those.
I'm glad you brought that up. Think about how the associations that we have with food, right? So how
Yeah.
can I change or develop good associations with food?
That's a big one, I think.
Right. So right now, most of us only associations we have with food is pleasure or social, right? Let's create other associations. How do we do that? By bringing awareness. Okay. Broccoli. Most people would say broccoli is not one of the most pleasurable, fun foods to eat.
No, it's definitely not.
But what
one
if
of
when you
them.
eat broccoli, you're really paying attention and you notice, this makes my skin look good. Or my digestion is so much better every time I eat a nice serving of broccoli.
Yeah.
Okay. If you continue to bring awareness to that, over time, what you'll naturally find is you might actually start wanting the broccoli. In fact, this happens to me. When I travel and I eat out a lot, when I come home, you know what food I reach for? Like cooked vegetables and fish.
That's so true.
Does that happen to you too?
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
I actually crave them.
Yeah.
I actually want those things. Now, is it the palatability of them? No, but I've made a different association. And by the way, food manufacturers know this. This is how they advertise to you. You see a beer commercial, it's not just beer, it's beer and girls and the beach.
Yeah.
It's not just food, it's food and a party and whatever, right? They've done studies on this where they've served people ice cream in toilet bowls, and they find people eat less of them. Listen to the actual
That's
why,
so true.
Right. So
Association.
so it's just really bringing aware and it's developing your own intuition. So you can start to read the signal and really, okay, so just to take it back, and this will help illustrate it a little bit. There's 4 stages of learning, no matter what we learn. The first stage is unconscious incompetence. So this is where we start out. We don't know what we don't know. And a lot of people are kind of here with nutrition. We don't know what we don't know. The second stage is really easy. We realize now that we don't know. So now we know that we don't know. Like, oh man, I heard Sal talking on this podcast. I had no idea. This is a lot of stuff that I don't know. The third stage is conscious competence. Conscious competence is I have to consciously be competent with what I'm doing.
Right.
So I have to consciously pay attention to my food. I have to consciously, am I getting enough protein? What are my calories at? Okay, Sal said become more aware. Like I'm noticing that the vegetables are making me feel better. So maybe I'll try eating more of those. I notice when I eat this food that I get more inflamed or I don't feel as good. So maybe I'll avoid some of that stuff. But eventually you move from there to unconscious competence, where now that's intuitive. Now it becomes very natural. To give you an example, when you're breathing intuitively.
Yes.
Maybe not. Now that I said it,
I
now
know.
I think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're competent, but unconsciously so, right?
Yeah.
You can get there with nutrition. It is a process. I'm sorry, it does take a little while, but it's the only permanent way to do it. There is no permanent way to do it. Now, what does it look like when you get there? You eat in a way that takes care of your body, takes care of your mind, takes care of your soul in a very balanced, natural way. By the way, this works for eating sweets and eating and having alcohol too. Because let's say I'm in this state where I've worked on the awareness, I have this good relationship with food. You invite me out to lunch or you have us come over for dinner and you make some drinks and we're watching the game, so we have pizza. Why wouldn't I have a few drinks and pizza? At the moment, what's important to me to my health is the social aspect.
Yeah.
Is connecting with these people. So you develop this natural balance, because you can also go in the extreme in the other direction, right? You can become like this fitness fanatic, orthorexic, where you carry your food everywhere. That's not healthy either.
Right.
So I do talk a lot about, and really as a trainer, I learned this because the counting calories, counting macros, giving people meal plans just failed.
I know you talk a lot about the fact that you think that meal plans suck.
Yes.
Okay, why do you think that meal plans suck? Because doesn't it keep people on
Yeah, if they eat like that forever.
Well, so great. So because there's no longevity to it.
It doesn't work long term.
Yeah.
It's not real life.
Yeah.
Real life doesn't. You have to navigate real life.
To get a kickstart, though, what do you think about meal plans to get a kickstart?
I think becoming aware requires structure. So yes, you should probably look at macros, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, know what's in food, learn about calories. Very important. Don't get stuck there.
Right.
Either you'll A, fall off, or B, you'll be the small percentage that is determined to stick to it, and then you become a zealot, and that those people are not healthy either.
Yeah.
Believe me, I know these people in the fitness space who they have no friends, they have no nothing, and
they have nothing.
All it is workout and eating the same thing.
It's very sad. It's a very sad existence, because it basically controls everything you do in your life, and you have no life basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So no, balance is very important, and you can get to that place by pushing the right behaviors, not the mechanisms of diet.
But I think where it could be good, right, is that if you're always on the go and you're going to grab a burger, like
Sure.
McDonald's, or like just like crap around you, if you have like a meal, whatever, like a meal service, that you have good food to grab
Sure.
instead of the alternative.
Sure.
But you're right, long term, because eventually you get off that, and then what happens?
I think
you gain the weight
I think
back.
you need to develop the skills to navigate
Your own.
like normal life. You know what happens if people are super strict on meal plans? Something happens. They go on a vacation, or I'm whatever, and then you've developed this on the wagon, off the wagon type mentality.
Yeah.
Because this is psychologically what happens. If everything is so rigid in this box, the second I step outside of that box, now I'm not in that box anymore, and I don't care. Now I already went off my diet. Let's go crazy. This is why somebody, when they go off their diet, they don't eat one cookie. They eat a whole sleeve.
That's me again.
Of Oreo cookies.
100%. I think that's what, because if you're so regimented, when you see something that, or you like have that taste in your mouth, you'll go crazy.
That's right. That's right. I also talk about just the motivation that brings us to these places, right? If we go into exercise and eating right from a positive place, we're much more likely to keep it long term than from a negative place. Most people don't realize that their initial motivation is very negative. It's I hate my body. Mm-hmm. I'm fat. I don't look good. I want to change this. And although that can be a powerful initial motivator, it's never long term, because nobody wants to hate themselves forever. At some point, by the way, when you hate yourself, exercise is a punishment and diet is restriction.
Right.
When you're doing it because you want to care for yourself, why am I exercising? Because I love myself. I want to take care of myself.
Right.
Why are you eating right? Because I want to take care of myself. I deserve to be taken care of. Well, now it's exercise is a treat. Eating right is care, is self-care. Very, very different attitude.
Yeah.
Also, the choices you make are much more appropriate. Now, if I went out with my friends and ate a bunch of pizza and drank a bunch of beer, and I'm motivated by self-hate, well, I might go to the gym and be like, oh my God, I'm so disgusting. Why did I do that? I'm going to go beat the crap out of myself. Even though I probably feel terrible and maybe I didn't sleep well, I'm going to go beat the crap out of myself. I'm going to go run as hard as I can, sweat this off or whatever. Inappropriate training, not as effective. If it's self-care, I may be like, oh man, I really didn't take care of myself very well yesterday. I kind of went off a little too far. I think I'm going to go to the gym and do things that feel good. And because I'm tired and inflamed, that feels like yoga, maybe some walking, maybe some light resistance training, which actually is how I would train you if I was your trainer. If I was your trainer and you told me that yesterday you didn't get good sleep, I would train you that way. I wouldn't beat the crap out of you.
Right. So it's like reframing these messages you tell yourself.
Absolutely. If it comes from there, you enjoy it. How many times have you heard this from people? You see someone and you're like, hey, you still doing that diet or you still doing that workout? And they go, oh no, I stopped because I just want to enjoy my life. Like,
so many times I hear that. Right.
Eating right and exercising improves your quality of life. Isn't it strange that people say that they have to stop doing that in order to enjoy their life? It's because it was coming from a place of self-hate.
Yeah.
Of course, you're punishing yourself. The workout to you is punishment. Of course you wanted to stop.
But the thing is, like, it's again, this is all like, it's a process, right? Like people can't.
Of course.
So there's such a behavioral change in all of this that people I don't think sometimes understand. It's
No.
not the physical part's the easy part. It's the mental change and
That's
how
everything.
Yeah, and it's the hardest part.
It is, and I want
a
people
commitment.
and I want people to feel hopeful because because people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds like so much. Yes, it is, and you go one step at a time, very slow.
Right.
You start with one change that is challenging because it has to have meaning. If it's not challenging, it's got no meaning, right? So something that's challenging, but also realistic for you. Be honest, right?
Right.
When someone would ask me, hey, Sal, how many days a week should I work out? I want to start working out. I'd always ask them, how many days a week do you think you could work out forever?
Right.
Because I want a real answer. Okay, so realistic yet challenging, start there. Once that change becomes a regular part of your life and it becomes not easy, but something you do routine, then you add one more thing. And you may be thinking, well, that's going to take forever. It's not as long as you think. In fact, over time, it starts to accelerate. If I took two parallel lines and I moved just 1 degree, you wouldn't be able to tell here, but follow them along for a mile or two, and the distance becomes
much greater.
Tremendous. And again, this is the only way that I've seen, besides the rare epiphany, which is extremely rare, and epiphanies usually come from something bad, like you had a heart attack or something like that. Aside from that, this is the only way I've ever seen everyday average people develop a lifelong relationship with exercise and nutrition that's positive. It's the only way. Everything else has been what we always see, which is lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight,
right?
On, off, and nobody ever goes anywhere.
Although also there's a piece to this though. It's habitual, right? Like I think once people do it long enough where they feel the good effects,
yes.
like their energy, their focus, the alert,
yes.
like that is usually the motivation, in my opinion, to continue, right?
Jen, I'll tell you something. You hit the nail on the head. Look, who's going to walk farther? The man who's obsessed with the destination or the man who likes to walk?
Right.
If you start to develop that relate, and you will, if you do this the right way, you will.
It's getting people to do it long. The hardest is like the stop is in the start, or is that what it's?
Yeah. If you do this the right way, like I'm talking about, you will start to develop a positive relationship with exercise. And when that happens, you're not going to stop.
Right.
Now I work out in the morning, not because I'm trying to get buffed or look good.
You are buff, but that's a whole other story.
I do it because I like it. I would do it no matter what. I work out because I enjoy the process of it.
Me too.
You know what that means? I'll never stop.
No, I agree, but you've got to get to that point to like feel it, and people don't realize that it can be agony at the beginning, but then you kind of go over that hurdle. But there's also I want to ask you about plateauing again.
Yes.
For people who exercise, who do the stuff and they still plateau because they've been eating properly for a long time, they've been exercising properly for a long time. How do you like rejig the system a little bit? Like how do you kind of mix it up for people like that so they don't continue to plateau?
That's a great question. So a few different things. Change your workout. That's a very easy, common one, right? So with resistance training, change the rep ranges is a very easy thing to do. So maybe for 3 or 4 weeks, I focus on 6 to 8 reps. Now I'm going to go 15 to 20 reps, right? So that's one way to do it. Changing exercises will do it as well. Your diet. Here's a big one.
Yeah.
Most people are interested in fat loss, right? And then they may plateau with their fat loss. Believe it or not, going through a short period of eating more food will typically boost your metabolism back up to trigger more fat loss down the road. So what does that look like? And they've done studies on this, by the way, where they'll take people who they're on this like 12-week or 16-week calorie deficit, but they'll inject like 3 or 4 days every couple weeks where the person eats higher calories, and they find that they lose more fat as a result. Bodybuilders have done this for a long time. They call them cheat meals, which I don't like that name. But
isn't it kind of cycling? Isn't that called cycling, kind of your calories?
Yeah.
Or carb days. You can do carb days.
Yeah, and this is bodybuilders have known this for a long time. So what I would say is if you start to plateau, if you're getting leaner, and then you plateau, try doing a couple weeks where your calories are higher and you're just focused on building strength. Then try cutting a little bit again and then see what happens. And usually that gets things moving.
Really? And there's also in your book, you talk about a different thing. There's two different ways. You were saying it in reference to if you're somebody who's starved yourself and you've and then like you don't want to gain like like bikini models when they do the cardio thing and the eating, and then to kind of
reverse dieting?
Reverse dieting.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. What's reverse dieting?
So reverse diet is...
I've never heard that before.
That's actually it's a common phrase in the kind of hardcore fitness space. My friend Lane Norton was really the first one to talk about reverse dieting, but we'd all kind of seen it and experienced it ourselves. A reverse diet is when you take somebody who, through years of dieting and maybe over exercise or over cardio, has really gotten their metabolism to get really, really slow. So I've experienced this myself. So I'll use the example of, I had a client who was a bikini competitor, and she would diet for these shows and get really shredded. But by the time she came to see me, she was eating I don't remember what it was, like 1,500 calories a day. She was doing cardio every single day. On top of it, she was doing weight training. And she was like, I can't work out more and I can't eat less. And my body's not getting leaner. Like, what's going on? So, well, your metabolism has become hyper efficient, right? Slowed down. We need to speed it back up. So what we did is we slowly reduced her cardio exercise. I had her slowly increase her calories over time. And what she did, she started putting on some lean tissue, and it started speeding up her metabolism. Sometimes I see this with obese people. I've actually had this where I'll have someone that sees me, hires me, they want to lose 70 pounds, and we'll track their food because I want to see what their calorie intake is. And I'll be like, wow, this person needs to lose 70 pounds and they're averaging about 1,800 calories a day. Like, how am I going to get them to lose 70 pounds? Having me eat 800 calories a day?
Yeah.
And then once they lose the weight, where are they going to go? They're totally screwed, right?
Yeah.
You see this with The Biggest Loser.
A lot, yeah.
Where they lose the weight and they gain it right back. So what I'll do with that person is I'll say, okay, I'm going to have you continue to eat 1,800 calories, and we're going to start resistance training and make you stronger. And then slowly actually bump their calories. I'll go 50 calories a week here and there till I get to the point, and they either won't gain any weight or they might gain a little bit of weight doing this, but we're getting to the point where I'm comfortable cutting their calories. So typically, I'm getting them up to, 2,500 calories. Their weight really hasn't changed much at all. Now I have a place to start from. Now I can cut calories. And here's the beauty of it. I'll cut 500 calories from there, and they're still eating more than they came to me with. Now they're losing weight.
Right. That reverse diet is scary to a lot of people, I'm sure, listening. Like, because once you gain a lot of weight, you would gain.
If you do it right, you might gain a little bit of weight, mostly water. You'll gain some muscle. Not much, though. You actually don't gain much. And then when you cut, you got this ramped up metabolism. I love doing this with women the most because they're the most scared.
Yes.
Guys, if I tell them to reverse diet, sometimes they're like, cool. I
know, exactly.
But with women, I'm like, okay, we're going to bump your calories. Why? Why do you want me to bump?
I know.
But after about 3 or 4 months of doing this and they're feeling really strong and their shape is looking good, and then they're like, okay, should we start cutting? I'll say, well, how do you feel about your diet? Like, well, I'm eating a lot. I feel like I can't eat anymore. Like, okay, now it's a good time. Then we'll cut the calories and the fat just comes off their body.
I like that. And then also one more thing, and then we'll wrap this up. But you were talking about how you eat something very small in the morning and you eat nothing during the day, and then you eat a big meal. I mean, is it like kind of it sounds like it would be like intermittent fasting with a snack, kind of, or like
kind of. And here's the thing with meal frequency.
Do you believe in intermittent fasting?
For some people,
Okay.
For other people, I don't.
For you, what do you call that for yourself?
I mean, sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. I guess you could call that intermittent fasting. Sometimes I don't do that.
It just sounds like eating very little calories until
later. Yeah. So I definitely wouldn't recommend any kind of fasting for someone who wants to lose weight. We used to call that starving yourself. It does develop a bad relationship with food. But really,
that's what people are using it for. You know that, right?
I know.
People are.
Oh, but I'm fasting.
Right.
No, you're just not eating.
Exactly. It's under the guise of doing like something for good, like healthy and good for you. But really, if you really kind of like peel back the layers, because I think they're going to be like they're going to lose weight.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I'm with you. On
no,
that.
Meal frequency. There's definitely cases where you might want to eat more or less frequently. So like less frequently. Sometimes people with gut inflammation issues.
Yeah.
Eating less frequently sometimes is better for them. More frequently, sometimes people with hormone issues, women, sometimes with like HPTA axis, dysfunction. Sometimes you'd want them to eat like a fat protein meal in the morning to stabilize their cortisol and their blood sugar and whatever. But that all being said, meal frequency is up to personal preference.
Right.
If you like to eat 5 small meals a day because that makes you feel best,
Although it's a myth you said also, of course.
It doesn't burn more body fat or anything like that. But
where did that ever come from? That everyone thinks that like they got to eat
bodybuilders.
Yeah.
It came from bodybuilders because bodybuilders were eating 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, which
Right.
you're not going to do with 2 or 3 meals. And the supplement companies where they saw that and they said, oh, what a great way to sell people protein bars and shakes. If we tell people eat 6 meals a day, they're probably not going to eat 6 real meals a day. So we'll sell them, protein powders and bars.
Yeah.
It's very smart. Very smart strategy.
It's very, exactly.
But it makes no difference. It really does make no difference. It's except for certain cases, makes no difference. Personal preference. If you like eating twice a day, eat twice a day. If you want to eat 5 times a day, it's fine. So long as the calories and macros and everything is good, you're fine.
So you don't really care what time people eat, how often they eat, as long as they're eating the amount of calories they should be and the macros are on.
Now,
point.
the times, here's the deal. If you eat really late at night, it tends to not be healthy. That's just behavior. Remember that old thing, like don't eat past 6 p.m.?
Yeah.
One of the reasons why that works is A, people eat less, and B, when we tend to eat the wrong foods, it tends to be late at night.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would say, look, you probably don't want to eat within 2 hours before bed because it does influence your sleep. Other than that, doesn't make a difference.
So why do you only eat like an apple in the morning then?
I tend to feel best when I am light, when I don't have a lot of food. I have the most energy. Obviously, I'm on a podcast. I like to talk to people. I just feel sharpest doing that. When I eat a meal, I like to sleep, relax.
Right.
So I tend to eat that way. Although these days now I have a little more in the morning. I tend to eat something like, I'll make like a shake with 8 to 10 egg yolks, throw some protein powder in there, and I'm good to go.
Is there any supplements that you take like on the right? Like, do you take a pre-workout to look like this?
So I'll take caffeine before my
Wolverine,
workout. Oh, geez. You know what's a good supplement for most people?
What?
Creatine.
For women too?
Everybody.
Really?
Creatine is Creatine is the most studied ergogenic supplement you'll find anywhere. There's hundreds and hundreds of studies done on creatine. It is now being shown to improve heart health, cognitive function, anti-inflammatory. It definitely helps promote muscle strength. It definitely helps build muscle. And indirectly, it does help speed up the metabolism and burn body fat. If you take creatine, you will gain a little bit of weight. It's water weight. It's not bloat. Yes, you're pressing that up. It's not bloat.
Okay.
Bloat is outside the muscle. This water gain goes inside the muscle. So what you'll notice is your muscles look tighter and fuller and more sculpted. So it's not the same. So although the scale might go up a pound or 2, you'll feel tighter, almost like you have a little bit of a pump, like when you work out.
Really?
Yes.
And then you just put that in a shake, or you just drink it by itself.
Just take it once a day.
Like that's such a
someone like you, 2-3 grams. That's it. 2-3 grams a day.
Really? Because it's such a guy thing.
When it first came out, that's how it was marketed. No, creatine is tremendous. In fact, you're going to see. You're already starting to see it. Wellness supplements with creatine. They're starting to put creatine into care homes for the elderly because it improves cognitive function and strength and makes them feel better. Like I said earlier, it's good for heart health. Creatine is a great supplement for everybody. I don't care what your goal is. Fat loss, muscle gain, doesn't matter. Take
really?
Mm-hmm.
How about collagen? What do you think that's what do you think of the collagen craze?
Collagen, it's high in certain amino acids that are beneficial for joint health and skin. Ultimately, though, if your protein is really high, it really doesn't matter because you get those amino acids no matter what. But if your protein isn't in the upper limits of what, so for maximum results from protein, maximum results being appetite suppression, because protein is very, very satiating, and muscle building, you're looking at eating about 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body mass. So if you weigh 100 pounds, 60 to 80 grams, right? Mm-hmm. So do the math. Unless you're really overweight, in which case you use lean body mass. But for most people, 0.6 to 0.8. If you're eating that much protein, then it doesn't make a big difference. If your protein's under that, then collagen makes a big difference because now you're supplementing with those amino acids that your body is looking for. So people with lower protein diets, and you don't need to necessarily eat tons of protein. It definitely has its benefits, but it's not necessary. If you're eating lower than that, then supplementing with collagen, you should notice improvements in skin health and your hair.
Really? Mm-hmm. So wait, did you say you take a pre-workout then besides the creatine?
Sometimes I take a pre-workout, which is essentially caffeine and maybe some beta-alanine and some citrulline amino acids.
I'm hearing a lot about beta. What does that do?
Beta-alanine is think of it this way, right? So the burn that you get when you work out, beta-alanine increases what's called carnosine in the muscle, which buffers it against that. So you get better performance. So you add like a rep or 2 to your workout. So it's more of a performance supplement. It's minor. By the way, supplements, they're not in the same category as food, sleep, and exercise. But if you're like at that high level,
Yeah.
then you might know. Beta-alanine does have a little bit of a side effect. Have you ever taken it?
No, but everyone's telling me about it. And
If you take beta-alanine, you'll probably feel kind of tingly under your skin. Some people can't handle that. So
Really? No,
yeah.
I like that. And see, I'm very on the workout supplements. I've never touched anything. I mean, like I take True Niagen for
Yeah.
NAD. That's the only thing and I take vitamin D.
Yeah, vitamin D is good. Yeah.
And then what else do I take? I think that's all I take.
No fish oil?
I take omega-3. Yeah, I take that
I
too.
figured, yeah.
How did you know?
Huh?
How did you know?
It's a
take
very
that?
good supplement. I can tell you got great skin. So.
Oh my God. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I don't, but thank you. So I've never, that's why I'm not very familiar.
Try maybe 2 grams a day.
Okay. And beta-alanine, you think, or the...
You could try beta-alanine, see if you like it, but
Okay.
just creatine, 2 grams a day. So they tell you to take 5 grams a day. That's a lot for most people, unless you have a lot of muscle mass. 2 or 3 grams. So it's like half of a scoop that'll come with the little...
How about glutamine or glutamine?
Just an amino acid.
Do you take that too?
No, I mean, my protein's so high, I don't
You don't
supplement
take it,
with
okay.
amino acids, yeah.
All right, I know you liked that episode. If you did, check this one out. 30% body fat. For men, this is way too high. This is actually a bit high for women as well. So in today's episode, we're talking about how you can go from 30 to 10. What is 10% body fat? This is when you have a visible six-pack. Can you go from 30 to 10%? Yes, it's possible, but not if you guess along the way. So we're going to talk about how you can do that in today's episode.
Now, there's a huge range, right, of like body types.
Yes.
Some people can run a little bit heavier or a little bit higher body.